Chapter 717. The price was a little high, but compared to his life, and he could afford it, 200 million high-grade spirit stones was really not a lot. However, he felt very aggrieved. If he had known this would happen, he wouldn't have come all the way here to pay for humiliation. Wait. Everyone was shocked and looked at the person who spoke. All of them were shocked. At first, they felt the pain of paying such a large sum of money, but now, they were worried that Niu Yid would go back on his words. Niu Yid pointed at Pei Fong and said, "He is the leader. He was loud and disturbed my sleep, so he is an exception. I will add another 100 million high-grade spirit stones. Everyone else is the same." He was really overbearing. However, Yu Qianqiu naturally had his own thoughts. Some people, they needed to be taught a lesson, especially these thick-skinned, black-hearted and sly old foxes. If you pretended that nothing had happened and let them go for nothing, they might suspect that you had a guilty conscience. In the end, they might turn around and repeatedly test you. Towards these people, he had to maintain an appropriate amount of pressure to make them feel fear and pressure, not giving them the chance to think nonsense. He had to put on a high profile and clearly let them understand that he was more powerful than them and could take their lives at any time. The more he pressured them, the more they would be afraid of him. Of course, there had to be a limit to pressuring them. He couldn't force them to do something desperate. Therefore, he chose Pei Fong to make an example out of him. He couldn't pick a pushover at this time. By suppressing the most powerful one, he would naturally scare the others. As for why he wanted each of them to take out 200 million high-grade spirit stones, it was because when Yu Qianqiu was on Xianxian Island, he found close to 800 million high-grade spirit stones in the storage bags of Hua Zongming and the other two. It seemed that Hua Zongming and the others weren't the most powerful among the feudal lords. If they could carry so much money with them, these people definitely couldn't be any worse. Yu Qianqiu did an average calculation and estimated that each of them could take out 200 million. After all, these people were not ordinary cultivators but local money bags. Although a mere 1 or 200 million was a huge amount, it was not enough to hurt these local money bags. Therefore, they should be willing to take out their money to save their lives. When Pei Fong heard that he wanted to add another 100 million, his expression became complicated. No matter how rich he was, it wasn't easy money that he picked up from the streets. Asking him to take out another 100 million, just like that would be painful. After all, it wasn't 1 or 2 million, but 100 million. People were different. Pei Fong was Pei Fong, not Yin Bai Kong. If it was Yin Bai Kong, he would probably take the initiative to give another 100 million, and he would even find an opportunity to send more money in the future. He wasn't afraid of Niu Yid asking. He was afraid that Niu Yid wouldn't accept. Seeing him hesitate, Lady Mu turned to look at Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu raised his eyebrows and said expressionlessly, "Damn fatty, you're not willing?" Pei Fong was startled and smiled awkwardly. I'm willing. Very quickly, he took out another storage pouch and offered it with both hands. He really refused a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit. After Lady Mu finished counting, she went to Qi Zhuojuan who was standing beside him. Qi Zhuojuan silently took out a storage pouch. Therefore, it was Ouyangda's turn again. These three standing at the front were naturally the unluckiest. They set an example for the people behind them and took out their money. Yu Qianqiu was secretly delighted. This was a huge amount of wealth. However, on the surface he said expressionlessly, "Those who paid, scram. Don't wait for me to change my mind and regret it." Needless to say, these three late-stage soul formation cultivators didn't want to stay here anymore. Pei Fong smiled with his bleeding face, cupped his hands and said, "It's my honor to be able to meet Senior Niu today. We will take our leave now. Before you leave, listen carefully. From now on, I will take over by Changchun's matters. If anyone violates the old rules, they won't be as easy to talk to as they did today." Yu Qianqiu waved his sleeve and shouted, "Scram." The three of them nodded speechlessly. Then they shot into the sky and quickly flew away. After these three people took out their money and left, the others didn't have any temper. They all prepared their spirit stones in advance and waited for Lady Mu to come and collect the money. Those who paid hurriedly ran away. No one dared to stay. Who knew if this fickle Neo Yid would go back on his words? Therefore, some people even took the initiative to pay first, and then quickly leave. There were fewer and fewer people around. Some people were even shocked because they didn't have enough spirit stones with them. They hurriedly found someone to borrow them. If they were too late, and everyone left, who could they borrow money from? That could kill people. Not long after, the feudal lords who came with ulterior motives didn't get to see the excitement they were looking forward to. Instead, they were all ruthlessly slaughtered. The most unbearable thing was that they took out their own money and gave it away for free. They even had to say thank you to the woman who collected the money. How could they endure this? As a result, they walked away with their faces covered in grime. When Yu Qianqiu saw that the sky had returned to its tranquil state, he returned to the large house, feeling very pleased with himself. Then he sat down on the mat. Not long after, he saw Lady Mu come in with a large cloth bag. She placed it in front of him and opened it, immediately revealing a large pile of storage bags. Lady Mu looked at Yu Qianqiu with respect. She really admired him. It turned out that Mr.'s name, Neo Yid, was so famous outside. He could scare so many soul formation experts to this extent. It was obvious how powerful his hidden cultivation was. It was no wonder that he could take over the demon domain. She had always thought that Yu Qianqiu had hidden his profound cultivation, but she didn't know that there was another reason. You put on a good show today. Yu Qianqiu first praised Lady Mu. Then, he looked at the pile of storage bags and rubbed his hands excitedly. How many are there in total? Lady Mu came back to her senses and said with a smile, there are a total of 133 people. 200 million for each person. Together with the extra 100 million from that fatty, it's a total of 26. 7 billion superior grade spirit stones. Waha! Yu Qianqiu laughed wildly. He suddenly pounced on the storage bags and gave them a warm hug. He almost burst into tears. I'm rich. This demon domain torturer is really poor. When Bai Changchun left, he didn't leave a single spirit stone behind. Now he suddenly became rich. Yu Qianqiu, who was lying on the storage bag, really felt sorry for his master. With his master's ability, he could easily extort 1 billion from each of the countries. A few hundred countries would be hundreds of billions. However, his master was too pure. Otherwise, his successor would be the richest man in the world. What a pity. After the excitement, Yu Qianqiu sat back in his original position. He stared at the pile of storage bags in front of him and shook his head with a sigh. What a pity. Only about 100 out of more than 300 lords came. If all of them were here, we would have made a fortune. Lady Mu chuckled and thought to herself, Sir is too greedy. But it's not bad to have so many. Yu Qianqiu pointed to the storage bags in front of him and said, Take one. As the housekeeper of Obedient Island, how can she not have money? Lady Mu was stunned. She knew that it was not good to disobey Yu Qianqiu's words. Hence, she thanked him and took one. Then, Yu Qianqiu waved his hand, and the pile of storage bags in front of him disappeared. They went to the Utopia treasury guarded by Bai Suzhen. At this moment, the sound of someone flying quickly came from the sky. Someone had landed on Obedient Island. Lady Mu did not think much of it, because she believed that with Sir's abilities, what couldn't he handle? However, Yu Qianqiu's expression changed slightly upon seeing this. He was worried that some of the deity transformation stage lords had noticed something was amiss, and had returned to settle the score with him. While he was worrying, a person had already appeared at the door. It was none other than Nongzhu. When Nongzhu saw Yu Qianqiu, she and Yu Qianqiu were stunned at the same time. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He wondered why Nongzhu had rushed over. Had the matter with Viburnum Fairy been resolved so quickly? Nongzhu was shocked when she saw Neo Yid. Then, she remembered that Neo Yid was Yu Qianqiu. You, why are you here? Yu Qianqiu wanted to ask him about the matter with Viburnum Fairy, but he changed his words. Nongzhu's gaze paused on Lady Mu for a moment, and her eyes became a little sharp. Seeing that she was sitting so close to Yu Qianqiu, she seemed a little unhappy. It was not because she was worried that there would be an ambiguous relationship between them, but because when Bai Changchun was here, this woman did not dare to come into the house easily. Did she become unruly after Bai Changchun left? In Nongju's subconscious, obedient island, and this house represented by Changchun, and no one could blaspheme them. Lady Mu naturally knew that Nongju's status in Obedient Island was not ordinary, and she was not an outsider. Being stared at by Yu Qianqiu, she felt a little guilty, and hurriedly got up. She bowed to Nongju and said, "Sir, I'll go out first." She turned around and bowed to Nongju, and then walked out quickly. Nongju looked back coldly, and then stared at Yu Qianqiu and snorted, "Don't lose the dignity of the torture envoy of the demon ghost region." Yu Qianqiu waved his hand disapprovingly and said, "I don't have the ability to maintain my dignity. Why don't I pass the position of torture envoy to you now? Don't talk nonsense here." Nongju sat next to him angrily. Looking around at the quiet surroundings, she asked suspiciously, "Where are Pei Fong and the others? Didn't they come?" "They came. I just drove them away not long ago," Yu Qianqiu said proudly. "You drove them away? Don't talk nonsense." Nongju suddenly came to her senses. She pointed at Yu Qianqiu's face and said, "You scared them away with the identity of Niu Yid? How could this work?" "It doesn't matter what method I used. As long as it can solve the problem, it's a good method," Yu Qianqiu said proudly. He decided to keep the matter of making a fortune a secret for the time being. Otherwise, he was afraid that this old man would blackmail him. Nongju thought for a while and nodded slowly, saying, "It seems that I worried too much. But this is also good. After the news that Niu Yid has taken over the demon ghost region is spread, at least for a period of time, no one dares to disturb the demon ghost region. I can also make use of this time to seize the opportunity." Hearing this, Yu Qianqiu asked curiously, "Seize the opportunity for what?" Nongju was silent for a while and said, "I'm going to do closed-door training for a period of time." Chapter 718. Yu Qianqiu laughed. His master was right. This old man had finally made up his mind to break through his cultivation. "That's not right." Nongju suddenly slapped her thigh and pointed at Yu Qianqiu's nose. "With your cultivation, we left Xian Island right after each other. How did you arrive at the demon region before me? There must be something behind this. Tell me honestly." Yu Qianqiu was startled. This was really hard to explain. He did come back before Yu Qianqiu, and not just a little bit earlier. He had already slept soundly on the lap of a beauty. He rubbed his nose and smiled. "I've cultivated a magic art for escaping. I'm good at speed. That's why I came back earlier than you." Since he couldn't explain it clearly, he could only use self-deprecation to keep it a secret. Nongju looked at him from head to toe. She said doubtfully, "No wonder you're so good at escaping. What magic art is it? Tell me." "Haha, you'll know when you have the chance." Yu Qianqiu smiled perfunctorily. Seeing that he didn't want to tell her, Nongju didn't turn on him. She stood up and stared at him in silence for a while. Then she said slowly, "I trust Bai Changchun's judgment. You'll have to rely on yourself from now on." She took out a jade archive and threw it to Yu Qianqiu. "I've set up a message formation in the purple bamboo forest. There are coordinates in the jade archive. You can look for me if you need anything. At least, I won't leave the purple bamboo forest for a while." "You're going back to the South Sea now?" Yu Qianqiu stood up and followed Nongju to the door. After stepping out of the door, Nongju said with a serious expression, "Once Bai Changchun leaves, you won't be able to hold on for long. Sooner or later, you'll be exposed. I have to calm down and break through my cultivation to protect myself. If one day the demon region really, at least the purple bamboo forest in the South Sea can be your home." Yu Qianqiu laughed and said, "I'm not as pessimistic as you think, am I?" Nongju didn't want to argue with him, so she raised her hand and said, "Be careful, I'm leaving." "Wait." Yu Qianqiu stopped him and took out 2 storage pouches. "These are gifts for Zi and Furong, one for each of them." Nongju was startled when she received it. She then injected her divine sense into it to see what it was. After seeing it, she was stunned for a long time, and the muscles on her face twitched. There were 200 million high-grade spirit stones in each of the 2 storage bags. This was the first time he had seen someone give money to a woman as a gift. Moreover, he was very generous, giving 400 million high-grade spirit stones in one go. Nongju gradually came to her senses. She gritted her teeth and asked, Tell me honestly, how much money do you have? Yu Qianqiu waved his hand disapprovingly and said, It's not a lot. It's just so. It should be enough to spend in this lifetime. If it's not enough, I'll just earn more. Nongzhu was speechless. The SOSO from this money grubber's mouth must be a frighteningly huge amount. It was better not to know, lest she was provoked. He was a rich man. He watched as Yu Qianqiu took out another jade archive and inserted something into it. Then he took out 2 porcelain bottles and handed them to Miao Yi, saying, One of the bottles contains the limit-breaking pill, and the other contains the 7 treasures pill. There's a method to use it in this jade archive. Help me bring it to Furong. It can help her raise her cultivation level to the early stage of tribulation passing. Nongzhu took it and asked suspiciously, Didn't you say that this thing can poison people to death? Why did you give it to Furong? Although he knew that Yu Qianqiu wouldn't harm Furong, he still had doubts and couldn't help asking. There are real and fake pills. Yu Qianqiu explained weakly. Nongzhu suddenly became furious and said, How dare you sell fake pills to harm people? Yu Qianqiu rolled his eyes and said, Which eye of yours saw me sell fake pills? You can't talk nonsense. You go. Nongzhu was so angry that she flung her sleeve and flew away, looking at the black dot disappearing into the horizon. Yu Qianqiu shook his head and smiled bitterly. Then he frowned and continued strolling. A cool breeze caressed his face, and the grass was fragrant. Before he knew it, he had arrived at the edge of the 1,000 Miles Lake. Looking at the sparkling surface of the lake, he couldn't help but be startled. His eyes turned, and no one knew what he was thinking. Without hesitation, he jumped into the lake. Splash! Water splashed on the surface of the lake, creating ripples. His figure disappeared from the surface of the lake. Under the water, Yu Qianqiu occasionally spat out a string of bubbles from the corner of his mouth. He dived head first into the bottom of the lake. The water was clear, and schools of fish could be seen swimming in the lake. Some of the bolder fishes even ran over to play around him as he dived, diving down with him. After diving for nearly 100 meters, the light in the water gradually weakened, and it became dark in front of him. The water pressure was getting stronger and stronger. The fish following him didn't seem to be deep-water fish. They all swung their tails and swam back upstream. Yu Qianqiu also felt a little uncomfortable. He pointed his finger downward and began to use the water formula. The surrounding water quickly separated, and his whole body seemed to be wrapped in a bubble, sinking rapidly. The surroundings became darker and darker, so dark that not a single ray of light could be seen. The surroundings were extremely quiet, giving people a terrifying sense of oppression. Yu Qianqiu himself didn't know how deep he had dived. He estimated that it was about 1,000 meters. He felt that using the water formula to repel the water pressure was also getting stronger and stronger. The huge pressure around him kept squeezing, and he gradually felt that he couldn't bear it. It was obvious that with his current cultivation, it would be difficult for him to withstand too much pressure when using the water art. Fortunately, the water formula was miraculous. It could strip the oxygen contained in the water for him to breathe. Otherwise, it would be even more uncomfortable. Just as he was hesitating whether to give up, a faint white light appeared below him. Yu Qianqiu's eyes lit up. It seemed that he was not far from the target he wanted to check out. He gritted his teeth, endured the pressure, and dived deeper. The light below grew bigger and bigger, but his face was also flushed red. The pressure was too great, and he couldn't bear it. But he still persisted. When he started to feel dizzy, Yu Qianqiu didn't dare to go any further. Looking down, the target was only about 100 meters away from him. Unfortunately, the pressure was too great, and he couldn't get close at all. This was also because he could use the water formula to repel the water. Otherwise, with his cultivation, he wouldn't be able to reach this position. At the bottom of the tranquil lake lay a serene pearl. Under the backdrop of the darkness, it emitted a gentle white light, illuminating the surrounding topography of the lake. There were rare deep-water fishes leisurely swimming around. Rather than calling it a pearl, it was more like an upside-down bowl. It was white and smooth like jade, but in reality, it was just a light barrier. This light barrier at the bottom of the lake was at least a few hundred meters wide and 100 meters tall. It was in a semicircular arc. From the surrounding topography, it could be seen that this place was originally a valley. The surrounding shadows rose and fell like a mountain range. Not far away there was a tall, round pillar-like mountain. Yu Qianqiu looked up the pillar-like mountain and was immediately shocked. Judging from the direction, this should be the lowest base of Obedient Island. He felt that it was a little strange. Most mountains were cone-shaped. How could a mountain grow like this? The circumference of the top and bottom was about the same, and it was as straight as a pillar. Furthermore, this height wasn't low. It was at least 2 kilometers, right? Such a scene couldn't help but make people think of the wooden fish and the wooden mallet used to strike it. The light barrier was like a wooden fish, and the pillar supporting Obedient Island was like the wooden mallet used to strike it. How could there be such a strange topography? Yu Qianqiu was puzzled no matter how he thought about it. After hesitating for a while, Yu Qianqiu felt like his ears were ringing, and the dizziness was getting stronger. The distance between him and the water had already shrunk to less than half a foot. If he stayed any longer, he would be in danger. Yu Qianqiu looked down at the light barrier and shook his head in pity. According to Bai Changchun, the entrance to the demon realm was sealed by the immortal emperor and the underworld king, and the light barrier was a seal that the myriad swords demon monarch added later on. In other words, the entrance to the demon realm was sealed by 2 seals. Even with Bai Changchun's cultivation, he couldn't break through the outer layer of the myriad swords demon monarch's seal. Yu Qianqiu originally wanted to see if he could go in, but he didn't expect that even approaching would be difficult. After working for a while in vain, Yu Qianqiu helplessly disappeared into the water. A big bubble broke into several pieces and floated up on the mountainside behind the mountain god temple, where the leaders of the Green Gang and Hong Gang were hiding. Yu Qianqiu stood in front of the plane and stared at the mountain god temple below. Because of the raging war in Huaxia, Shi Wenguang's army had already reached the vicinity. The common people were in a panic and didn't dare to go out. Thus, the mountain god temple seemed very deserted. Gu Qingyan and Hong Qi stood behind him and reported the recent developments in Huaxia. 1/3 of Huaxia's territory had already been captured by Shi Wenguang's army, and the poor people who had been oppressed by the imperial court for a long time could no longer bear the corvée labor and taxes brought by the war. So they all formed groups and rose up in rebellion. For a time, the uprising of the poor people was like a spark that started a prairie fire, making the precariously dynasty even worse. If there was no strong support, the dynasty would collapse, and defeat would be set in stone. On Wuji Island, the forces of various countries increased the mobilization of manpower, and a large number of cultivators continuously gathered on Wuji Island. In the other countries that were adjacent to Huaxia, there were also a large number of cultivators gathering. Other than the direction of the Demon Ghost region, they had already surrounded Huaxia. Looking at the movements, the forces of various countries were preparing to launch a large-scale attack on Huaxia's cultivation world. The entire Huaxia's cultivation world was as anxious as ants on a hot pan. All of this was within Yu Qianqiu's expectations. With Bai Changchun gone, the various countries would definitely officially make their move. Master, I heard that our Grandmaster is the #1 expert in the world, who has already gone to the East Holy Land? Hong Qi's eyes suddenly lit up as he interrupted. Yu Qianqiu made a non-committal in sound, and Hong Qi instantly revealed an extremely annoyed expression. It seemed like he was blaming his master for not bringing him to meet his grandmaster, but he did not dare to be presumptuous in front of his master. Gu Qingyan glanced at Hong Qi and continued to report, all the sects in Huaxia are in danger, and they're all worried that the soul formation experts of various countries are about to make their move. Also, there are quite a number of cultivators in our 2 sects, so we should also prepare early to avoid being implicated when the time comes. You're worrying too much. Yu Qianqiu thought for a while and said, some time ago, the new torture master of the Demon Ghost region, Niu Yud, already warned them that the soul formation experts of various countries don't dare to come to Huaxia for the time being. Think of a way to spread this news, so that the various sects can prepare for war with peace of mind. Don't make it so that they surrender before the fight even starts. Anyway, they're all tired of living. If there's something wrong with their cultivation, it's better to die a little more. Chapter 719. Gu Qingyan and Hong Qi looked at each other. Then Yu Qianqiu continued. If they fight, as long as they don't provoke you, don't get involved. Anyway, your subordinates are all wandering itinerant cultivators. They don't have a fixed territory, and are just making a living in the cracks. No matter who wins, you won't get any benefits. So, don't be used by them. Who cares who wins or loses? Continue being bandits. Yes, there's nothing bad about being a bandit. Freedom. You don't have to listen to others, and you'll still have food to eat. The two of them looked at each other speechlessly again. Gu Qingyan coughed and said, Boss, the 10,000 demons in Moon Sect seem to be sending people to look for you. Let them look for them. Yu Qianqiu didn't think much of it. I promised to help them deal with the soul formation experts who came to bully us. But the soul formation experts haven't attacked us yet. What's the point of looking for them? I can't be bothered with them. After giving instructions to the two of them, Yu Qianqiu returned to Utopia directly. He stood alone in a remote area and closed his eyes in deep thought. After a long time, he opened his eyes with a puzzled look, and his brows furrowed into a deep furrow. There was something that worried him. He didn't know what was going on with Bai Changchun in the East Holy Land. He searched for Bai Changchun's location in the East Holy Land several times, but he actually stopped at the same place and didn't move at all. He didn't know if it was because of the special environment in the East Holy Land, or because Bai Changchun was trapped. Either situation was easy to explain. He was just afraid that Bai Changchun had met with an accident and died. His worried gaze gradually became determined. He decided to take the risk and go to the East Holy Land to see what was going on with Bai Changchun. Otherwise, how could a living person not move for a long time? It couldn't be that he went to the East Holy Land to meditate, right? That was too nonsensical. Taking a deep breath, Zhang Xian disappeared from the spot. When he reappeared, Yu Qianqiu quickly looked around vigilantly. If something was wrong, he would immediately flash back. However, what he saw and heard in front of his eyes left him in shock. The sun was shining brightly in front of him, and the salty sea breeze was blowing gently. Waves were crashing against the shore in front of him, and the tide was rising on the white beach beside him. All of this indicated that he was standing by the seaside. Not far behind him, there were even some cacti that were as tall as a human growing on the slope. Carefully observing his surroundings, Yu Qianqiu became more and more confused the more he looked. He scratched his head in puzzlement. Could this be the legendary Holy East Land that was said to be extremely dangerous? The sea view is not bad. His gaze suddenly landed on an island in the distance. The more he looked at it, the more familiar it seemed. No matter how he looked at it, it looked like old ancestor Nanming's Xianxian Island. Holy East Lands? Xianxian Island? When Yu Qianqiu came to his senses, he was stunned. Could this be the Eastern Holy Land opposite Xianxian Island? After observing for a long time, he finally confirmed that he was standing in the Eastern Holy Land opposite Xianxian Island. It was probably because of the formation that sealed the Eastern Holy Land. When looking from Xianxian Island, it was a vast expanse of whiteness, but when looking from the inside, it was as clear as day. This was similar to the defensive formations used by some cultivation sections. However, the strange thing was that he did not see Bai Changchun nearby, but he could clearly sense that the silver ball he had given him was here. Otherwise, he would not have been able to teleport here. In order to accurately lock onto the location of the silver ball, Yu Qianqiu returned to Utopia once again. In the blink of an eye, he appeared where he had disappeared, but this time, he was 2 meters away from his original position. Yu Qianqiu stared at the white beach under his feet in a daze. His expression became abnormally terrified, and in the blink of an eye, he saw large droplets of tears flowing down his face. He suddenly cried out in grief, "Master, who did this to you?" He immediately knelt on the ground and began to frantically dig the sand. After digging more than a meter deep, he dug out a storage bag from the hole. He continued to dig with all his might, but he could not find anything. After a while, he sat down weakly in the 2-meter deep hole, hugging the storage bag as tears flowed down his face silently. He did not know what kind of expert Bai Changchun had encountered, to the point where even his corpse could not be found. If there had not been an accident with Bai Changchun's cultivation, how could he have lost his belongings like a 3-year-old child? After feeling sad for a while, he wiped away his tears and rummaged through the storage bag. He wanted to see if his master, the world's #1 expert, had left behind any valuable inheritance. This was what he thought. After all, the dead had passed away, and the living had to continue living well. If the dead could leave behind any treasures for the living, it would also be a form of comfort for the living. However, he was greatly disappointed to find that his master was as poor as ever. He only poured out the 10 or so small silver balls and a jade archive that he had given him. He did not expect the world's #1 expert to die so cleanly. However, when he saw the jade archive, his eyes lit up again. He guessed that the jade archive contained some kind of peerless cultivation method. Even if it was by Changchun's own cultivation method, it would be enough for him to live comfortably for the rest of his life. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. There was indeed something recorded in the jade archive, but it was not a cultivation method. Instead, it was a message that Bai Changchun had left for him. Yu Qianqiu, my disciple. Snow, rain, wind, and frost have lasted for 2,000 years. The great Tao is long and I walk alone. Carefree and without fear, clad in a green robe, I set foot in the East Pole. Yu Qianqiu was stunned for a moment before he reacted. He immediately cursed in exasperation. F***ck. Old man, you're so ruthless. Why are you walking alone? If I run into any trouble, I'll still need your help. He put away the items and leaped out of the 2-meter-deep sand hole. Then, he ran up the slope by the sea that was covered with scattered cacti. He looked into the distance, but he could not see a single person. Behind the slope was a vast expanse of yellow sand. Tall cacti grew everywhere, and their bodies were covered with thorns. It was as messy as Yu Qianqiu's mood. Bai Changchun did not bring the silver ball with him. Moreover, it had been so many days since the incident, and he had no idea where it had gone. How could he possibly find it? Yu Qianqiu let out a long sigh and sat down on the sand weakly. He felt like crying but had no tears. If he had known this would happen, he would not have taken over the demon's domain. He hung his head and muttered to himself, "You have no conscience. To think that I cried so much for you." Bai Changchun's action of leaving behind the storage pouch was simple. He did not want Yu Qianqiu to find him. From his short message, it could be seen that he did not want Yu Qianqiu to save him and bring him out of the holy land of the East, no matter how dangerous it was. Especially the third sentence, carefree and fearless. It was clear that he did not want to have any worries, and that he should go about his business and not look for him anymore. He wanted him to let go of the burden that he had been carrying for 1,000 years and go out on his own. Very cool. Typical Bai Changchun's arrogance. However, this was undoubtedly cutting off his own path of retreat. He could only charge forward without turning back, no matter how dangerous it was, unless the heaven and earth formation that sealed the Holy Land collapsed. Without his biggest backer, Yu Qianqiu's mind was blank. He did not want to think about anything, because just thinking about it made his scalp go numb. Once Niu Yid's identity was exposed, those soul formation experts who were deceived by him would not let him go. He would probably hide in Utopia for the rest of his life. As for Sherwin Guang and the others in the secular world, they would definitely end up very, very badly. I don't want to think about anything. Lying on the beach and basking in the sun, he crossed his legs and hummed a crooked song. There's no drunken sunset in the coconut grove, just a sea of blue, sunshine, beach, waves, cacti, and an old captain. After singing it many times, he suddenly stopped and got up. He patted his butt and looked around. He sneered and said, "You're relaxed after throwing me the burden. No way. No matter how big the Holy Land is, it's only this big. I don't believe I can't find you." He looked around and suddenly landed on the cactus that covered the sand. His eyes lit up, and he clicked his tongue. "This thing doesn't exist in Utopia, but I can dig some back and plant them. It'll add to the scenery." He got to work immediately. The black fire saber appeared in his hand. He dug a few of them and moved them back to Utopia. When he dug the 6th one, he stabbed the saber into the sand. Suddenly, a red liquid shot out from the place where the saber was inserted, spraying him all over. Damn it! What's this? Before he could finish speaking, he smelled a strong stench. He was furious. Since he had already dirtied himself, he stabbed the black fire saber into the ground. Every time he stabbed, a stream of red liquid would shoot out from the place where the saber was inserted. Such a demonic action was more or less a way to vent his anger. Bai Changchun's departure without saying goodbye had indeed made him a little unhappy. But at this moment, the ground under his feet suddenly shook violently, causing him to lose his balance. Suddenly, he felt that the ground was much higher, and there were roars coming from below. What was that? Yu Qianqiu was instantly dumbfounded. He tried his best to stabilize his body, not knowing what was below. Suddenly 3 thick black, vine-like things shot out from the sand within a radius of a dozen meters. They were wriggling toward him. Yu Qianqiu's gaze turned cold. He waved the black saber in his hand and destroyed them like they were mud. The stench of red liquid splattered everywhere, and chunks of things fell from the ground. The rest quickly retreated back into the sand. In the end, the roars from below became even louder. F***ck. When Yu Qianqiu was angry, there was no reasoning. He had always believed in striking first to gain the upper hand. He had already determined that there was definitely a monster below. He stabbed the saber in, not even reaching the saber handle. Fresh red and smelly blood spurted out. Yu Qianqiu pulled out the saber, and a ball of fierce black flames appeared on the saber. He had used the black flame to burn the blade. Woo-woo! A deafening howl came from below. The violent tremors caused the ground to sink, and then it suddenly rose up, throwing Yu Qianqiu into the air. Yu Qianqiu, who was in the air, was covered in blood. He held the black fire saber in his hand and stared down like a god of death. Chapter 720. Sand flew up like rain, and a huge monster popped out from the sand. For a moment, it was hard to see what it was, but more than a dozen huge tentacles stabbed at Yu Qianqiu in the air. Yu Qianqiu quickly flew out, but after flying for a short distance, his expression changed. He felt that while he was using his cultivation, the true essence in his body was being consumed several times. Alarmed, he quickly landed on a sand dune dozens of meters away. At this time, he did not have time to investigate the reason for the rapid consumption of true essence in his body. He turned around and stared at the monster that popped out from the sand. He saw that after the monster popped out of the air and spread its tentacles, its arm span was almost more than 30 meters. It was like a big umbrella opened in the air, setting off a storm of sand that fell from the sky. Big octopus? Yu Qianqiu looked at the big guy that popped up in the air, and then fell down stunned. The monster with more than a dozen huge tentacles looked very much like an octopus, but it seemed that an ordinary octopus did not have so many tentacles, nor was it so big. The strangest thing was that its body seemed to be covered with black scales the size of a palm. After letting out 2 painful howls, the big guy fell straight from the air and smashed into the sand motionless. One of the huge tentacles fell 2 meters in front of Yu Qianqiu. At the end of the tentacle, there was a sharp black claw that looked like a fang. A burst of black smoke came out from the top of the big octopus's head, and its huge body was withering at a visible speed. Then it spread to the dozen or so huge tentacles. Not long after, the huge monster turned into a pile of ashes on the sand. This was the terrible result of being burned by the black fire. Yu Qianqiu did not know whether this big guy was an octopus or not. In any case, he did not know what kind of monster it was. He looked at the black fire extinguished saber in his hand with a dignified gaze. Using the fire spell to maintain the saber did not consume much true essence. But now that he carefully examined it, he found that the true essence consumption was greater than usual. At first, he did not notice anything unusual, but when he fiercely circulated his true essence while flying, he found that something was wrong. Previously, he had thought that it was the monster's doing, but now that the monster was dead, he discovered that revolving the fire art to maintain the saber was still consuming his quintessential essence. Clearly, it had nothing to do with the monster. What the hell was going on? Yu Qianqiu looked around suspiciously, but didn't find anything unusual. so he put away the broadsword. As a result, Yu Qianqiu stared blankly for a moment before suddenly shooting up into the sky. After circling twice in the air, he suddenly understood everything and quickly landed on the ground. It turned out that as long as he used his cultivation technique, he would discover that there was an unknown force in the world that was quietly extracting the true essence from his body. The more true essence he used, the more true essence would be extracted from his body. In short, the consumption was proportional to the extracted true essence, which was 1-to-1. In other words, the consumption of true essence to execute a technique here was double that of outside. Yu Qianqiu found it hard to understand. How could such a strange thing happen in the same world? Could it be because of the heaven and earth great formation that sealed the Eastern Holy Land? Just as he was puzzled, he saw a cloud of dust billowing in the distance. There were more than 10 people riding fast horses galloping on the sandy ground, galloping towards him at high speed. Yu Qianqiu scratched his head in confusion. Weren't the people sealed in the Eastern Holy Land the experts of the netherworld and immortal world? Why were they riding horses at such a tortoise-like speed? In a short while, more than 10 people arrived in front of him. They slowed down and circled around him. Yu Qianqiu sized them up in surprise. It seemed that their expressions weren't very friendly, and they were staring at him with hostility. However, what made him feel the most strange was that these people were obviously mortals. They were very different from the experts in the Eastern Holy Land he had imagined. The more than 10 people on horseback all had strong and sturdy bodies. They had bronze-colored skin and were very muscular. Their long hair was tied into mini whips, and they even wore feathers on their heads. Their necks and wrists were adorned with animal tooth jewelry. Most of the skin on their bodies was exposed, and only some of the important parts were covered with cloth. On their waists were crudely cast knives, and there were even some who carried animal tooth spears on their backs. These people's dressing reminded Yu Qianqiu of the Native Americans in his previous life. Their styles were quite similar. One of them made Yu Qianqiu's eyes light up slightly. It was actually a beautiful woman. She had a strong and voluptuous body. Her 2 slender thighs with beautiful curves clamped on the horse's belly. Her full breasts were wrapped in animal skin. Coupled with her bronze-colored skin, she was filled with a wild beauty. It made people want to conquer her with a single look. However, she wore a 5-colored feather on her head, and the knives on her waist were of much better quality than the others. She also had the appearance of being supported by the crowd. She seemed to be the leader of these people. If one looked carefully, they would discover that on the naked arms of these people, there was a similar pattern drawn. It was exactly the same as the monster with many tentacles that Yu Qianqiu killed. A man next to the wild beauty suddenly waved his hand and pointed 100 meters away. He exclaimed, "Garland, look." Everyone's gaze followed. Yu Qianqiu also couldn't help but look back. He discovered that it was the ashes left behind after he killed the monster. The 2 men rode their horses and galloped over. They circled around the pile of ashes and examined it. Then they quickly galloped back. One of them nodded and said, "Garland, it should be the remains of a man-eating octopus. But it seems to have been burned to ashes by someone. The commotion just now should have come from here." In an instant, everyone's eyes were fixed on Yu Qianqiu. They were somewhat in awe. The wild and sexy beauty asked, "Did you kill the man-eating octopus?" Her gentle voice was mixed with undisguised brutality. It gave people a pure and natural feeling. It was very pleasant to listen to. Yu Qianqiu shook his head without hesitation and said, "I didn't kill it. The person who killed it has already flown away." He spread his arms and made a flying gesture. It was as disgusting as it could be. The reason why he didn't admit it was because he felt that he shouldn't take responsibility for everything before he understood the situation. It wasn't safe. In addition, from the pattern on these people's arms, he deduced that the dead monster might be their totem. If he admitted it, he might offend them. The group of people looked at each other and exclaimed, "Immortals!" Yu Qianqiu's eyebrows trembled slightly when he heard that. After the shock, the beauty called Garland asked doubtfully, "Which tribe are you from? How can you barge into our tribe's territory with your bare hands?" Yu Qianqiu was speechless. He felt very conflicted. Damn it! Is this the Eastern Holy Land? Why does it feel like I've come to a primitive society? He scratched his head and thought for a while. He pointed at his head and said, "I lost my memory. I can't remember anything. After I woke up, I found myself here." He lied casually, but this was the least credible lie in the long history of his lying. There was no other way. He didn't know anything about the situation here, although the people in front of him were all mortals, who knew what kind of background they had. "Lost your memory?" Garland said in a daze. The group of people on horseback were dumbfounded. They looked at each other. Someone said to the person beside him, "Elder Meng from the tribe seems to have lost his memory because of his old age. He can't remember anything." "Big brother. That's called Alzheimer's, okay?" Yu Qianqiu was speechless. Another person said, "I heard that someone in the tribe fell off his horse and hit his head on a rock. In the end, he also couldn't remember anything." Garland waved her hand and stopped everyone's discussion. She stared at Yu Qianqiu and said, "Looking at your gorgeous clothes, your attire isn't ordinary either. You should be someone from a faraway city. If you're from a nearby tribe, we'll definitely know you." She looked around and continued, "There are often ferocious beasts around here. It's not safe for you to be here alone. Why don't you go back with us first? When you remember anything, we'll decide what to do." What a kind person. Even if he lost his memory, he would still believe it. Yu Qianqiu nodded repeatedly in agreement. He was still worried about not understanding the situation here. It would be best to go back with them and ask for some information. Unexpectedly, a man beside Garland stared at Yu Qianqiu and said, "Garland, this person's eyes are flickering. One look, and you can tell that he's not a good person. If we bring him back, what if he's a spy sent by some tribe? The fence gathering is about to begin. We have to prevent anyone from betraying us warriors. Besides, how are you going to explain to the tribe elders if you suddenly bring a stranger back? You're the one who can tell that you're not a good person." Yu Qianqiu cursed inwardly, but pretended that he didn't understand. Seeing that the others also nodded in agreement, Garland seemed a little hesitant. But when he saw Yu Qianqiu's obedient and pitiful look, he immediately said decisively, "Bring him back first and have someone guard him. I'll explain to the tribe elders. If they don't agree, it won't be too late to drive him away. Bodo, give him your horse." The one called Bodo was the strong man who stopped Yu Qianqiu from going back. He nodded helplessly and said, "All right." He jumped off the horse, pulled the reins over, and stuffed them into Yu Qianqiu's hands. Garland asked, "Do you know how to ride a horse?" Yu Qianqiu nodded. Garland nodded and said, "Follow us." With that, he took the lead and galloped away. Bodo climbed onto the back of another man's horse. The two of them rode side by side, and the group galloped away. Yu Qianqiu turned back to look at the indistinct Xian island in the distance. He jumped onto the bareback horse without a saddle, pulled on the reins, and kicked the horse's belly with his heels. The horse's hooves kicked up yellow sand, and he quickly chased after the group of people in front of him. After about 15 minutes of running, they finally ran out of the yellow sand. Green grass began to appear around them. Not long after turning around a valley, a vast forest appeared in front of them. The group of people directly rode into the forest. After passing through the deep forest along a winding path, their eyes suddenly opened up. A wide lake as clear as a mirror lay quietly in the depths of the forest. It made them feel like they were in a fairy tale. Chapter 721. In the lush green grass beside the lake, there was a path that looked like gray ribbons. A dozen or so riders formed a line and galloped along the path to the foot of the short mountain ahead. It was a grayish-brown stone mountain. With Yu Qianqiu's cultivation, he could see at a glance that there were many caves on the mountain. There were people going in and out of the caves, so it was obviously used for living. As they ran past the lake, Yu Qianqiu, who was at the back, was a little dumbfounded. He couldn't help but look back. This was because there was actually a group of naked men and women happily bathing in the lake near the foot of the mountain. Those women had their breasts exposed without the slightest scruple. In groups of 2 or 3, they were stirring the clear lake water and singing loud, beautiful, and aphrodisiac songs. F***ck, this is such a good place. Yu Qianqiu's eyes lit up. As he looked at the people in the lake were also looking at him curiously. The reason was probably because they were curious to see him wearing so many clothes. When the group reached the foot of the mountain, they all dismounted. Bodo came over to lead his horse. Yu Qianqiu looked around and saw that the grass at the foot of the mountain was surrounded by a fence. There were many horses tied to the fence, and the group of people were tying their horses to it. Inside the fence, there were many crude tents made of animal skin, and many children were running and playing among them, breathing in the fresh air filled with the smell of nature. And then looking at such a simple style, Yu Qianqiu sighed with emotion. Garland, who had tied the horse, walked over to him. She stood in front of him and looked at him for a while before saying, "Don't run around. I'll report to the elders. If they agree to let you stay, then you can stay. Otherwise, they'll drive you out." Understood. Yu Qianqiu nodded with a smile. He couldn't help but take a few more glances at Garland's body. Only then did he realize that this woman's figure was even better when she was standing. She had a strong waist, full breasts, and perky buttocks. Coupled with the wild aura she exuded, she was truly pleasing to the eye. Garland didn't care about his lecherous eyes at all. He waved his hand, and two men came out of the people who came with him. They crossed their strong arms in front of their chests and stared at him from both sides. They seemed to be monitoring him, afraid that he would run away. Yu Qianqiu didn't mind. He watched as Garland walked into a cave at the top of the mountain. Then he glanced at the two people on his left and right, turned around with his hands behind his back, and looked leisurely at the people bathing by the lake. He thought to himself, looking at it with pure appreciation, it's really primitive. However, what was even more primitive was yet to come. Not long after, the men and women who were bathing in the lake walked up to the shore hand in hand and hugged each other, kissing and touching each other without restraint. Soon after, pairs of them fell on the grass by the lake and began to copulate on the spot. In an instant, the quiet lakeside was filled with gasps and moans. F***CK. Group. Field team? Yu Qianqiu's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. He was truly dumbfounded. The situation was far beyond his expectations. Shoo. Shoo. Suddenly he heard a loud and clear whistle. Yu Qianqiu silently turned his head and looked to both sides. He saw that the two strong men were beaming with joy. They put their fingers in their mouths and whistled hard. They even spread their limbs and made bodybuilding poses towards the lakeside, activating the strong muscles on their arms. The most terrifying thing was that the children who were originally running and playing inside the fence were also clinging to the fence, waving their arms and shouting at the people who were copulating by the lake. It was a little like a cheerleader in a sports competition, and the men who were working hard by the lake also worked even harder. The more intense gasps and moans intertwined with each other, lingering and lingering. Oh my God. I've seen everything in my life, but I've never seen this. Yu Qianqiu's head drooped down powerlessly. He was completely speechless by these people. And when the two men who were monitoring him saw his dejected look, they suddenly looked proud. One of them walked to Yu Qianqiu's side, showing off his burly body that was nearly 2 meters tall, and compared it with Yu Qianqiu's small body, revealing a look of infinite contempt. Yu Qianqiu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. At this moment, Garland ran down from the mountain. She was slightly stunned when she saw the dejected Yu Qianqiu, and then looked at the two men who were demonstrating by the side. She couldn't help but giggle. Yu Qianqiu raised his head and looked at her. He shook his head and sighed slightly. He really didn't know what to say. Who would have thought that a man beside him would suddenly jump in front of Garland and dance his hands and feet to show off his robust body? He kept dancing provocatively, as if he was courting her. As a result, Yu Qianqiu was once again dumbfounded. Yu Qianqiu was even thinking, could it be that any man or woman here could do that? Garland patted his strong chest and pushed him away. The man immediately became listless. Garland walked to Yu Qianqiu and said with a smile, "Someone who lost his memory, can you still remember your name?" Yu Qianqiu was taken aback. Yu Qianqiu? What a strange name. Garland mumbled and said, "The elders said that women can reproduce, and children are the future of the tribe. As for men, they have to bear the responsibility of protecting and raising the tribe. Our tribe doesn't take in useless men. If you can hunt a wolf or any ferocious beast in the forest to prove that you are a real man, then our tribe will be willing to take you in temporarily. Otherwise, we won't waste food on you and will expel you. Do you have the courage to accept this test? Yu Qianqiu looked at himself up and down. Did he look so weak that he couldn't even kill the alpha wolf? To be honest, he didn't want to stay here at all. Mingling with this group of primitive people was too unbecoming of his identity as the dignified Phantom Region's torture master. However, he didn't know how deep the waters of the Eastern Holy Land were. He had to find a foothold and spend some time to understand it. Otherwise, he might get into trouble if he just barged around randomly. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he touched his nose and said, "Accepting the test is not a problem. I would like to ask, what tribe are you from?" He subconsciously looked at the group of people fighting in the wild by the lake. "Cannibals," Garland said with a smile. In the end, it gave Yu Qianqiu a fright. He said in shock, "Cannibals?" The two men at the side immediately laughed out loud, as if they were looking down on Yu Qianqiu's cowardice. "Don't be afraid." Garland also chuckled. She pointed at the totem on her arm and said, "This is a man-eating octopus. They have been multiplying since a long time ago. They originally lived in the sea, but for some unknown reason, they were confined even though the sea was so close to them. The animals on land could no longer enjoy the embrace of the sea, and these man-eating octopuses slowly got used to life on land. They like to hide under the sand and hunt people or animals that pass by. Because they are the strongest and most ferocious beast in our tribe, they have become the symbol of our tribe. This is why we are called cannibals, not because we eat people." "Oh." Yu Qianqiu nodded to show that he understood. Then he asked, "Then how do I accept the test? Do I go hunting in the forest now?" "You must be accompanied by our people to see you kill a ferocious beast with their own eyes." As Garland spoke, she suddenly pointed and said with a smile, "Tomorrow, you will go hunting with them." Yu Qianqiu turned his head and saw a group of people coming out of the forest on one side, returning with all kinds of beasts they had hunted. They were carrying the beasts on their backs, hands and shoulders. It could be said that they had returned with a full load, especially the strong man at the front, who was carrying a big brown bear on his shoulder. It was probably a few hundred kilograms. Even Yu Qianqiu was a little surprised to see that a mortal could carry such a heavy thing. He must be really strong. When the group returned, it immediately attracted the cheers of the children around them. They all ran to greet them, and at the same time, they wanted to see how many kinds of prey they had hunted today, and what the most ferocious prey was. The man carrying the big brown bear walked directly towards them. Suddenly, he threw the prey on the ground with a bang, and even the ground shook. This burly man, who was more than 2 meters tall, walked so far with a heavy load, but his face was not red, and he was not panting. He was looking at Yu Qianqiu curiously with a pair of big eyes. "This is Bodo's brother Boli. He is the strongest warrior and man here." Garland smiled and introduced him to Yu Qianqiu. Then he introduced Boli. "This is a poor man with amnesia. His name is Yu Qianqiu. He will go hunting with you tomorrow. If he can kill a ferocious beast, the elders will temporarily take him in." Boli was stunned, and then he pointed at Yu Qianqiu and laughed boorishly. "Even the thinnest man here is stronger than you. You can hunt ferocious beasts with that body of yours? If your neck is bitten off by a beast, you will lose your life. I advise you to leave this place." Yu Qianqiu really wanted to go up and beat him up, but he had a faint smile on his face as he said, "I can give it a try. If I really get my neck bitten off by a wild beast, that's my fate." He imitated the way the people here spoke. Boli was still shaking his head. Garland said unhappily, "Boli, the elders have agreed." Boli was stunned. He looked at Yu Qianqiu and nodded. "All right then. We will take you with us tomorrow." Then he turned to the men and women who had finished their business by the lake, and waved his arms, shouting, "Woo!" The men and women ran over and helped to unload the prey from the horses' backs. They were very happy to see so many prey. At this moment, Boli suddenly picked Garland up and walked to the lake with her in his arms. Garland also hooked her arms around his neck and gazed at him affectionately. Yu Qianqiu was speechless. He could only watch as the two of them went to the lakeside and stripped off the few pieces of clothing they had left to bathe together. After taking a bath, they unscrupulously did vigorous exercises by the lake. After seeing this unrestrained scene, Yu Qianqiu's expression seemed to be used to it. However, the thoughts he had about Garland at the beginning had been thrown out of his mind, and he felt a little nauseous. He looked into the distance, wondering where Bai Changchun had gone. Chapter 722. With the return of the hunting team, the men and women of the tribe immediately became busy. Slaughtering, disemboweling, skinning. For a moment, the originally fresh air was filled with the stench of blood and stench. The women set up a big pot to light a fire, and the men threw the big pieces of meat directly into the pot to cook, and some directly roasted them over the fire. The children, with small knives in their hands, worked together to pry open the beasts' mouths and pulled out the sharpest fangs of the beasts. Someone carried a big bag of salt from the cave, smeared most of the remaining fresh meat with salt, pickled it on the spot, and then transported it to the cave to be stored in the shade. The various kinds of animal skins that were peeled off were also sprinkled with powdery substances and dried in the sun. It was estimated that after processing, it could be made into clothes for them to wear. After a while, the smell of meat and stench coexisted in the air. The people of the tribe seemed to have smelled the most wonderful smell in the world, and the children happily jumped up and down. Yu Qianqiu sat alone on a small grassy slope at the side, looking at these easily satisfied people with a smile. Night fell, the bright moon rose in the sky, and the stars twinkled. Piles of bonfires were burning at the foot of the mountain, and the stench in the air had long dissipated, leaving only the rich smell of meat, which made people feel hungry. This tribe of only a few hundred people seemed to have turned out in full force at this time, all gathering at the foot of the mountain, dancing a rough dance around the bonfires. Only then did Yu Qianqiu realize that those who were qualified to live in the cave were women and children, and many of the women had big bellies. 6 rather old women dressed in the most colorful furs of wild beasts, with the brightest feathers on their heads. They were escorted to the flattest grassland, which was covered with soft animal skins, showing off their noble status. Just after the 6 old women sat down, the animal skin drum that had been placed on the side made a dong-dong sound, cheerful, warm, and full of passion. Garland, the most beautiful and sexy woman in the tribe, was the first to jump into the middle of the bonfire, her seductive hips and waist twisting like a water snake, instantly igniting a night of revelry. Men, women, old, young, and children began to sing and dance to their heart's content. The wild singing resounded through the night sky, and the unrestrained dancing was unrestrained. A feast that belonged to this tribe began. The delicious meat was taken down from the pots and grills, and the most delicious parts were cut off and presented to the 6 old women. Then, everyone began to eat heartily. The fragrant liquid in the urns was also drunk by everyone. A simple and happy life. Yu Qianqiu, who was excluded from the crowd, sat alone on the grassy slope outside the fence, watching everything with a smile. Someone noticed his loneliness. Galen brought him a piece of meat on a wooden plank, along with a hollowed wooden cup filled with fragrant liquid. "You must be hungry. It's for you." Galen placed it in front of him. Yu Qianqiu looked at the wild, sexy, and kind woman in front of him and said, "Thank you." He picked up the cup and sniffed it. It was really fragrant. He tried to take a sip, but found that it was sour and difficult to swallow. He grabbed the piece of meat and took another bite. It was a little overcooked. Other than the fragrance of the meat, there was only the salty taste. The taste was really not flattering. He really did not know how these people could eat so happily. For him, who was used to eating delicious food, it was a little funny. But in order to show respect to the kind hostess, he forced himself to finish it one bite at a time. Galen, who had been staring at him, smiled and said, "I'll get you some more." Yu Qianqiu hurriedly waved his hand and said, No, I'm already full. I really can't eat any more." Galen frowned and said, "You only ate so little. No wonder you're so thin." Yu Qianqiu smiled awkwardly. Galen sat next to him and asked curiously, "You really don't remember anything about your origins?" Yu Qianqiu smiled and shook his head, indicating that he really did not remember. He then pointed to the 6 old women in the tribe and changed the topic. They are your tribe elders? Yes. Galen nodded. Yu Qianqiu asked curiously, why are the tribe elders all women? What about your tribe leader? Is there no tribe leader? In his mind, there must be a tribe leader in every tribe. Galen patted her chest and said, I am the tribe leader. Women are the most respected, so the tribe elders are naturally women. The women who can become tribe elders are people who have made great contributions to the tribe. They are all the women in our tribe who have the most children. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. After the two of them talked for a while, he finally understood the situation of this tribe. It turned out that this tribe was a small matriarchal society. Women had the highest status in the tribe, especially the women who had the most children. They were respected by the entire tribe. Just like the 6 old women, they were respected by the tribe as tribe elders. And Galen could become the tribe leader because she was the most beautiful and sexiest woman in the tribe. She could attract the most men. This seemingly ridiculous thing had its own explanation. Women who could attract the most men to have sex with were the most likely to have the most children. This kind of women enjoyed a status second only to the tribe elders. At the same time, they had the right to choose the strongest men to have sex with. They wanted to give birth to the strongest men, or the most beautiful women. Then the most beautiful women could attract more men to have sex with, and the strongest men could protect the tribe and hunt more prey to raise the tribe. Based on this logic, beautiful women made great contributions and carried the heavy burden of strengthening the tribe. They really did have the right to become the tribe leader. In short, in order to reproduce the next generation, this tribe highly advocated sex between men and women. It could be done at any time, and no one would look down on it or feel ashamed. Instead, the men and women who did not do it would be looked down upon by everyone. When a woman appeared in the tribe that was recognized as more beautiful or sexier than Galen, then Galen's position as tribe leader would be handed over. Although it was ridiculous, there was no doubt because the more beautiful woman could attract the stronger men to have sex with. Yu Qianqiu was speechless. The relationships in this tribe were a little messy. To put it bluntly, it had even disrupted ethics. The children born were raised by the entire tribe. In fact, it was impossible to tell who the father of the child was. As long as the woman was willing, any man in the tribe could have sex with her at any time. However, if the woman refused, the man had no right to force the woman. This was because women had a very high status in the tribe. After knowing this, Yu Qianqiu could only shake his head and smile bitterly. It was not good for him to make any comments. There was naturally a reason for it to exist. While the two of them were sitting here talking, there were already many aroused men and women rolling around on the grass. Yu Qianqiu really found it a little hard to accept. He could only silently say, "Get used to it." Galen, what did you mean by the fence meeting you talked about during the day? Yu Qianqiu asked. Galen sized him up with a curious gaze, as if to say, "You don't even know this. You really have lost your memory." After organizing his thoughts, he said, "The most honorable place in the entire continent is the Immortal City. There are many powerful immortals living there. Below the Immortal City are many great feudal lords, and below the great feudal lords are the feudal lords. Within the territory of every feudal lord, there are many tribes. Our tribe belongs to the territory of Lust City's city lord, and the city lord is also the feudal lord. The entire continent holds a fence meeting once every 3 years. First, there will be a division competition in the feudal lord's city. The top 100 strongest warriors will be qualified to go to the great feudal lord's city to participate in the finals again. The top 100 warriors in the finals will have the opportunity to go to the Immortal City. We don't know what happens after going to the Immortal City, but it should be to serve the immortals." Yu Qianqiu frowned and muttered, "Don't tell me there are no benefits to participating in this kind of competition?" "Of course there are benefits," Galen explained. "If the tribe's warriors can win in the preliminary competition and enter the top 100, the tribe can get a prize. If they win in the finals, they can get even more prize money. With the prize money, we can buy enough salt." "Buy salt?" Yu Qianqiu was stunned. "The sea is sealed, and we can't get close. Naturally, we can't get salt. Only the people of the immortal city have a way to get salt. Salt is very expensive. The surplus of our annual hunting harvest is sold in the city, but the money we earn isn't even enough for the tribe to use for a month. So only the tribe's warriors can participate in the fence meeting and win. With enough prize money, they can buy enough salt for the tribe to continue living, Galen said. So that's how it is. Yu Qianqiu nodded slightly, then suddenly asked, will the victorious warriors come back? The warriors who win in the preliminary competition will get the right to live in the city and can continue to earn money to buy salt for the tribe. The victorious warriors in the finals will go to the immortal city to enjoy life and won't come back. Galen said this with a complicated expression. Oh, Yu Qianqiu seemed to have a sudden realization. The dangerous East Holy Land, that was rumored to be in the cultivation world, had already formed its own social system. The so-called immortals in the immortal city were probably the immortals who were sealed here in the immortal world. Weren't there people from the underworld? Where did they go? Did they all die? Such powerful people shouldn't die so easily. Yu Qianqiu patted his head and said, why do I vaguely feel that other than the immortals in the immortal city, there are some more powerful people, but I just can't remember. You're talking about the people who live in the underground world, right? Galen reminded. Underground world? I think so, I can't remember. Yu Qianqiu smiled awkwardly. Galen immediately explained. Legend has it that there's an underground world under the mainland. A group of people who are as powerful as immortals live there, but they don't like to see the sun, so they rarely show up on the mainland. You should be talking about them, right? Yu Qianqiu nodded slightly. It seemed that the so-called people from the underground world were the people from the underworld who were sealed here. Chapter 723. Thanks to Chief Garland's care, he wasn't allowed to sleep in the open. Instead, he was given a tent. In fact, it didn't matter if Yu Qianqiu wanted a tent or not. When he refused, Garland looked at the moon in the sky and pointed to the lake. Every time there is moonlight, the crocodiles in the lake will climb to the shore. It's dangerous for you to sleep outside the fence. Crocodiles? Yu Qianqiu said in disbelief. Why do you bathe in the lake when there are crocodiles? Garland smiled. These crocodiles are called moonlight crocodiles. They only come to the surface of the lake at night to breathe. They only climb to the shore when the moon appears. Usually they hide deep under the lake. You will be fine as long as you sleep inside the fence. They rarely break through the fence. Even if they break through, the fence will block their movements. We can avoid them in advance. Rarely, Yu Qianqiu frowned. They can still break through. You live by the lake, aren't you worried at all? At this point, he suddenly stood up and stared at the surface of the lake with bright eyes. Others might not be able to see it, but with his cultivation, he saw a huge whirlpool in the distance. A huge silver-white figure dived into the lake. If it hadn't moved like this, it would have been difficult to distinguish the figure from the moonlight reflected from the lake. Yu Qianqiu said in a deep voice, Chief Garland, there is something in the lake. Garland pulled his clothes and signaled him to sit down. She smiled. Did you see something silver-white? That is the moonlight crocodile. In fact, it is safer for us to live by the lake. If bad people sneak in at night, they will often be attacked by the moonlight crocodiles hiding in the grass. Don't you think they are like the guardian of our people? Since she said this, Yu Qianqiu sat down and relaxed his vigilance. He asked suspiciously, have the moonlight crocodiles never attacked you? Garland frowned and muttered. I heard from the older generation that there was a moonlight crocodile attack about 200 or 300 years ago. However, I haven't seen it since, so there shouldn't be any problems. 200 or 300 years ago. Yu Qianqiu's eyebrows twitched as a thought flashed through his mind. Could it have something to do with the Eastern Holy Land opening once every 300 years? However, this was only a momentary thought, and he himself could not be sure. Garland suddenly pulled him and pointed to the lake, indicating for him to pay attention. Yu Qianqiu looked over. In fact, he could see far more clearly than Garland. He saw ripples on the surface of the lake. A group of 2 to 3 meter long, silver-white, short-limbed fellows climbed onto the shore and dived into the surrounding bushes. There were hundreds of them. In fact, even if they didn't sneak in, the moonlight on their outer appearance would become a natural camouflage under the moonlight. As soon as they crawled into the bushes, they stopped moving. It was as if they were waiting for their prey. If humans or animals trespassed, they would really die under their ferocious fangs. This made Yu Qianqiu click his tongue in wonder. There were indeed all kinds of strange things in this world. There was actually a silver-white crocodile. However, he had some doubts. Was the huge white shadow in the lake really them? Could it be that they surged in a group, and he did not see it clearly? The moon was high in the sky. After indulging to their heart's content, the clansmen returned to rest. The bonfire turned into red charcoal, and the red light gradually faded and gradually extinguished. Inside the fence, there were a few more braziers for illumination. There were also a few clansmen holding torches and patrolling around at night. Garland, who had left and returned, led Yu Qianqiu into the fence and came to a small tent in the center. He said, "You can sleep here for the time being tonight. Don't run around if you have nothing to do, lest you get injured by the arrows of the night patrol clansmen." This tent could only sleep one person, but Yu Qianqiu did not have any objections. In fact, it did not matter if he had a tent or not. At this moment Boli, who was half naked, came again. He directly carried Garland away and entered a tent at the foot of the mountain. Yu Qianqiu listened to the panting and moaning sounds in the surrounding tents and shook his head speechlessly. They were really a clan that worshipped tradition. He had learned something new today. Then he also went into the small tent. The inside was covered with a layer of soft animal skin, so that people would not lie directly on the grass. Yu Qianqiu lay inside with his arms as a pillow and his legs crossed. He was not sleepy at all. His mind was constantly thinking about Bai Changchun. With Bai Changchun's character, he would definitely find an expert to fight when he came here. So the Immortal City would definitely be his goal, or it could be said to be his ultimate goal. Because the top experts of the Eastern Holy Land would definitely be there, and Bai Changchun would definitely not be able to resist such a temptation. In other words, as long as he went to the Immortal City, he would have a chance to find Bai Changchun and bring him back. However, he was unfamiliar with the place and did not have Bai Changchun's cultivation. If he rashly went to the Immortal City, he would definitely not have a good ending. Just think about it. He could not even deal with a soul formation expert. How could he deal with a group of immortals? After thinking about it, his eyes suddenly lit up. If he could participate in the fence gathering, wouldn't he have a chance to go to the Immortal City? Bang walala. Suddenly, there was a chaotic sound outside, followed by screams. Someone shouted, "Help!" Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He could already hear the sound of people running out of the surrounding tents. "The moonlight crocodiles are attacking us," people kept shouting. Among them, there were the screams of women and the frightened neighing of fine horses. It was obvious that the outside was already in a mess. At first, Yu Qianqiu thought they were doing some kind of ceremony, but he suddenly sat up and dashed outside the tent. The moonlight shone like mercury. Many men raised torches, spears, and swords as they swarmed downwards. They saw hundreds of silver-white crocodiles rushing towards the crowd. The fence had long been knocked down by the crocodiles, and a few men were being dragged towards the lake by the crocodiles. The arrows, the spears, and the swords couldn't effectively cut through the silver-white skin that was like armor. They almost didn't cause any damage to these fierce amphibians. The attacks of the cannibals were basically ineffective. Instead, they were once again bitten by the swarming crocodiles, and a few people were dragged back. The light of the torches flickered, and screams mixed together, ringing through the night sky. Yu Qianqiu's eyes narrowed. He saw the huge white figure in the lake in the distance again, stirring up a huge whirlpool in the middle of the lake. Beside him, there were people rushing down with weapons, all trying to save their people who were being dragged and bitten by the crocodiles. Yu Qianqiu's face darkened. He still wanted to rely on the cannibals to bring him to the Immortal City. If the crocodiles killed most of the cannibals, then the cannibals wouldn't be able to participate in the fence gathering. Wouldn't that ruin his plan? However, he didn't want to show his cultivation in front of the cannibals. As Yu Qianqiu's eyes flashed, a young man holding a spear suddenly tripped by the rope of the tent. The spear that swayed in front of Yu Qianqiu was pulled back by Yu Qianqiu. The young man jumped up and was still looking for his spear when he suddenly saw Yu Qianqiu, who was standing next to him, raise his spear and throw it with a whoosh. This spear, which was infused with true essence, whistled through the air and nailed to the side of the lake. It directly penetrated the head of a moonlight crocodile, and half of it was inserted into the ground. The clansman who had his leg bitten by the crocodile quickly opened the crocodile's mouth and hurriedly crawled back. The young man was stunned, and the clansmen who were fighting with the crocodiles by the lake were also shocked. They didn't know who had such great strength to actually shoot through the hardest head of the moonlight crocodile. However, they didn't have time to find this warrior. They desperately resisted the attack of the crocodiles. One after another, the clansmen who were passing by were suddenly stopped by the young man. The young man couldn't wait to collect the spears in their hands and ran in front of Yu Qianqiu. He held a dozen spears and said excitedly, "For you." Yu Qianqiu was startled, but he didn't hesitate. He grabbed a spear with each hand and threw them. Swish, swish. 2 spears whistled through the air and nailed 2 crocodiles that were dragging people to the ground. Yu Qianqiu waved his arms and threw a dozen spears in the blink of an eye. None of them missed their targets. Each spear killed a moonlight crocodile without any mishap. Moreover, the first ones that were killed were the crocodiles that were dragging people in their mouths. However, there were hundreds of crocodiles, almost equal to the number of cannibals. The people who had their spears snatched by the young man immediately reacted and scattered. It didn't take long for each of them to come back with a bundle of brand new spears. They untied the rattan ropes and held them by Yu Qianqiu's side. Yu Qianqiu didn't move and stood firmly in the same place. His 2 hands constantly manipulated the spears and threw them with a whistling sound. The spears accurately passed through the people in front of him, who were fighting with the crocodiles. In the blink of an eye, more than 100 spears were thrown, and each one was fatal. In an instant, more than 100 crocodiles were killed. With his help, the cannibal warriors immediately rescued all the people who had been bitten by the crocodiles. Seeing that Yu Qianqiu was showing off his power, they didn't try to be brave and retreated one after another. The clansmen who were holding a bundle of spears immediately ran to the cave, where the weapons were stored after the spears in their hands were thrown by Yu Qianqiu. The others took turns to hold the spears in their hands, so that Yu Qianqiu could throw them. The spears cut through the night sky with a whistling sound. In the blink of an eye, the attacking moonlight crocodiles were all killed. They were like nails on a board, and they were all stabbed into the ground by the spears. The remaining dozen moonlight crocodiles were suddenly afraid, and they hurriedly turned around and crawled back. However, these short-legged crocodiles weren't very fast on land. Moreover, Yu Qianqiu was determined to kill them, so he didn't plan to let them go. More than a dozen spears flew out one after another, and they were all nailed to the grass. Not a single one of them was allowed to escape. The lakeside suddenly quieted down. About 50 meters away from Yu Qianqiu, there were hundreds of spears stuck in the ground. Each spear was aimed at a fierce moonlight crocodile that was 2 to 3 meters long, and its head had been pierced through. The cannibals' eyes widened as they looked at this unbelievable scene. Chapter 724. Later, no one knew who took the lead in cheering. As a result, all the clansmen standing around raised their arms and cheered at Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu smiled faintly. With his own ability, killing these beasts was really nothing to be proud of. Suddenly, a delicate body broke into his arms and hugged him directly. Yu Qianqiu casually touched the smooth buttocks. He quickly pushed it away and saw that it was Garland, who was completely naked. Looking at this, it was estimated that when he was working with Boli just now, there was a sudden accident, and he didn't have time to put on those pitiful clothes. Garland looked at him with a fiery gaze. Yu Qianqiu looked embarrassed. He really couldn't tell who was taking advantage of who. However, he was really not used to hugging a naked beauty in front of everyone. He could only smile bitterly and shake his head at Garland. He didn't want to be the strong man that she fancied countless times. He didn't have the habit of sharing a woman with others. The cheering crowd ran towards the crocodiles that were nailed to the ground. Yu Qianqiu raised his head slightly, and his pupils suddenly shrank. he saw a wide wave of water rising from the middle of the lake, and it was quickly coming towards this side. Yu Qianqiu immediately shouted, "Stop, all of you come back for me." This group of people really listened to him now. Sure enough, they stopped one after another. However, when they looked back, they were somewhat puzzled. They didn't know why he called them back. Was it because he killed the prey alone and didn't want to share with the clansmen? At this moment, there was a huge splash by the lake, and a huge silver-white figure directly jumped out of the water and soared into the sky. When the clansmen who ran to the front heard the movement, they looked back and saw the huge figure that blocked the moonlight. They were all immediately stunned. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and pushed Garland away. He grabbed a few spears in each hand, poured a powerful cultivation into them, and threw them out. 6 spears formed a matrix in the air, and with a strong wind, they whistled and shot out, blowing out most of the torches in the hands of the people in front. Pung pung sounds rang out, and the huge figure that had just leaped out of the lake and was about to pounce ashore fell back into the lake, splashing water everywhere. The waves rippled in the lake, and the huge figure disappeared. The man-eaters finally understood why Yu Qianqiu had called them back. Hence, they all ran back in fear and stood behind Yu Qianqiu. Recalling the scene just now, all of them stared at the undulating waves of the lake in horror. "What is that? Have you already killed him?" Garland asked with a trembling voice behind him. Yu Qianqiu shook his head with a solemn expression. The others didn't see it clearly, but he did. It was a giant moonlight crocodile that was nearly 20 meters long and more than 4 meters wide. The moment the 6 spears hit it, they all shattered. They didn't penetrate its leather armor at all, only knocking it back into the water. When the water splashed, the giant moonlight crocodile's cold eyes shone with a red light. It stared at him with resentment before sinking into the water. This beast seemed to have gained intelligence. It seemed like it was about to become a spirit. That last glance seemed to be a grudge against him. A cold smile appeared on Yu Qianqiu's face. "Even if you don't hold a grudge against me, I won't let you go today, lest you ruin my plans, you beast. You still want to fight me in the water?" Without saying anything, he slowly walked toward the lake with his hands behind his back. Everyone looked at him blankly, only to see him slowly walk to the lake, wading into the depths of the lake. When the lake water reached his chest, he directly dived into the lake. He actually dived into the lake with such a terrible monster. Everyone looked at each other in horror. Then, they thought about the fact that such a monster was hiding in the lake where they usually bathed, and they all felt a lingering fear. After Garland's proud breasts rose and fell, he turned around and organized people to heal the injured clansmen. Many people were still quietly staring at the lake, not knowing when Yu Qianqiu would come out. As soon as Yu Qianqiu dived into the bottom of the lake, 8 azure fire flying swords immediately came out of his body and illuminated the surroundings. Using the water art, he swam quickly in the water without any effort. His speed was even faster than flying in the air. He felt like a fish in water. The 8 azure fire flying swords formed a green lantern that quickly moved back and forth in the underwater world, startling all kinds of fish in the water and causing them to flee in all directions. This lake wasn't big, but it wasn't small either. It was probably a kilometer in length and width, and the deepest part was estimated to be 300 to 400 meters. Ordinary people couldn't dive so deep, but it was nothing for Yu Qianqiu. However, Yu Qianqiu searched the entire bottom of the lake, but he didn't see the giant crocodile. Logically speaking, with such a conspicuous white color and such a huge body, it should be impossible for it to escape his sharp senses in the water when swimming within a radius of 1,000 meters. Could it be that there was another world in the water? Yu Qianqiu frowned as he swam quickly in the water, accompanied by a green shadow. Suddenly, he slowed down and slowly landed on a towering rock at the bottom of the lake. Standing on the rock and looking around at the pitch-black underwater world, Yu Qianqiu let out a cold snort. The 8 azure fire flying swords were vigilant of his surroundings. He slowly closed his eyes and let the lake water around him soak his body. Using the water art, his senses gradually became one with the lake water within a kilometer. Every drop of water seemed to become a part of his senses. In a split second, Every corner of the lake couldn't escape his eyes. Even the tiny fish, prawns, and the slightest movement of the water plants were all detected by his senses. In an instant, the entire bottom of the lake was in his mind. If this lake was too big, he wouldn't be able to control it with his cultivation base. But underwater, it wasn't a problem for his senses to control the area within a kilometer. Yu Qianqiu's eyes suddenly opened. At the center of the lake, under the mud, there seemed to be a large living creature. But at this moment, an old and irritable voice transmitted to him through the lake water. "Little kid, you have already killed hundreds of my clones. Why do you still use your senses to chase after this old man? Don't go too far." It can actually detect my senses. Yu Qianqiu was a little curious. One must know that perception was completely similar to telepathy. It was illusory, and could not be detected at all. Under normal circumstances, he couldn't use it at all. He could only use it in water, fire, and fog by using one of the 5 elements cultivation techniques. With the help of these mediums, although it was magical, even he didn't know what was going on. In any case, it was completely different from the divine sense released by a cultivator. When he used his divine sense to check on others, or when others used their divine sense to check on him, both sides could sense it. But he had never heard of anyone being able to detect other people's senses. Yu Qianqiu slightly narrowed his eyes. With a swoosh, he scuttled to the center of the lake and floated 10 meters above the bottom. He used his senses to observe the bottom and replied to the location where he transmitted his voice. "You are that big crocodile? Looks like you have cultivated to become a spirit and can speak human language." *T. The irritable voice transmitted again. "This old man has already left the ranks of the spirits 300,000 years ago and ascended to the immortal world. How can I allow you to sully me?" Yu Qianqiu was startled and said suspiciously, "Don't tell me you are an immortal." He actually believed it somewhat, if it was said that it was impossible in other places. But in the Holy East lands, it was not strange for immortals to exist. "But, *T. I am an immortal, and an immortal emperor-level immortal at that." The old voice was impassioned. As if it was such a glorious thing, it felt like it was reminiscing about the glorious past and looking back. "Who the *CK are you talking about? Immortal emperors are supreme beings in the immortal world. How can you chat with me here?" Yu Qianqiu snorted coldly. "Don't think that you will be safe hiding down there. Watch how I kill you." "Wait," the old voice shouted loudly. "Little brother, from what you said, you don't sound like someone with the cultivation of an immortal. Otherwise, you should be able to distinguish the cultivation of an immortal. But that's not right either. If you haven't reached the cultivation of an immortal, how can you control senses?" Yu Qianqiu raised his eyebrows and laughed sinisterly. This old thing has changed the way he addressed me from little doll to little brother. His tone has also become much more polite. It seems like he is afraid that I will attack him. "Don't give me that. I won't be swayed by force or persuasion." Yu Qianqiu cackled sinisterly. "Today let me, an early-stage tribulation passing immortal, kill you, an immortal emperor-level immortal." "Wait. You are only an early-stage tribulation passing immortal?" The old voice was filled with disbelief, or rather disbelief. "You have a problem with that?" Yu Qianqiu did not hold back. With a swoosh, hundreds of green flaming flying swords appeared, illuminating the entire body of water. He wanted to make thousands of them, but the true essence consumption in this godforsaken place doubled, so he could only use them sparingly. Hundreds of flying swords were aimed at the ground below. The old voice immediately said anxiously, "Little brother, wait. Let's talk this out. Don't be in a hurry to attack." "Wait. I admit defeat, okay?" Yu Qianqiu snorted coldly. "There is no need to resort to insinuations in front of an honest person. How dare you lie to me? If you want to die, I will grant your wish. Watch me beat you, an immortal emperor, into immortal feathers." Before he could finish speaking, the old voice anxiously interrupted and said with a sobbing tone, "Little brother, I really did have the cultivation of an immortal emperor. But in the battle with the demon lord of 10,000 swords 100,000 years ago, I was beaten to this point by him. Luckily, I managed to survive, and I am struggling at death's door. Otherwise, I would not have ended up in this state. The demon lord of 10,000 swords? Yu Qianqiu was stunned, but he was really not in a hurry to attack now. A person who was qualified to fight with the demon lord of 10,000 swords was indeed not simple. He could not help but ask, "Old man, is what you said true or false? If you dare to fool me, do you believe that I will immediately pierce your heart with 10,000 swords, and then grind your bones into ashes after you die?" "I don't dare, I don't dare." The old voice sounded lucky to have escaped death, but at the same time, there was also a hint of desolation. Chapter 725. Yu Qianqiu stared at the mud at the bottom of the lake, and realized that it was filled with old marks. He really did not know how the old man managed to hide there. When he used his perception to investigate, he did not discover any other entrances. He immediately snorted and said, "Old man, you really don't give me any face. Is there anyone who hides down there and talks to me like this?" The old man laughed bitterly and said, "If I could really get out, I wouldn't have to do this. The key is that I'm trapped here, and I really can't get out. Don't talk nonsense with me. How did you get out just now?" Yu Qianqiu frowned and shouted. The old man said helplessly, "That was also my clone. My main body could not move at all." Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He rubbed his chin with his hand. No one knew what he was thinking. Suddenly he pointed at the bottom of the lake. The surrounding lake water immediately stirred up an undercurrent and churned wildly at the bottom of the lake. The old man immediately said in fear, "Little brother, what are you trying to do?" Yu Qianqiu couldn't be bothered with him, and continued to do what he was doing. The silt that had accumulated at the bottom of the lake, for who knew how many years, was pushed away layer by the undercurrent. The clear lake water immediately became extremely turbid. Because of the mud and water plants, the undercurrent was immediately revealed. 6 tornado-like water pillars stirred wildly at the bottom of the lake. The turbidity gradually spread in all directions. Not long after, the clear lake water within a radius of 1,000 meters became extremely turbid. Under the moonlight, the surface of the lake rippled. It seemed that something unimaginable had happened at the bottom of the lake. The man-eaters all looked at the lake in fear. They did not know what terrifying thing was about to happen next. Everyone thought that Yu Qianqiu was fighting with the lake monster at the bottom of the lake. After spending more than 4 hours, Yu Qianqiu finally cleared away the tens of meters of mud at the bottom of the lake. The turbid mud was all filtered to the sides of the lake by him, using the water art. At this moment, Yu Qianqiu was looking down with his mouth agape. He swallowed with difficulty. Under the illumination of over 100 flying swords made of azure flames, a huge silvery white body, that was over 100 meters long and over 20 meters wide was lying quietly at the bottom of the lake, motionless. This was a behemoth that he couldn't even imagine. It was a gigantic crocodile. Its silvery white skin was bumpy, as if it was wearing heavy armor. 2 rows of fangs were exposed at the front of its ferocious head, and its 2 bright red eyes were bigger than anyone else's. It was far beyond his imagination. 2 huge red eyes were moving around, sizing up Yu Qianqiu curiously. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. After a long silence he asked, This is your real body?" He focused his gaze and noticed that on the back of the giant crocodile, where its forelimbs and neck intersected, there was a huge ancient longsword pierced directly into its back, nailing it to the bottom of the lake. The exposed part of the huge sword was 6 to 7 meters long, and the blade was about 3 meters wide. It was dark golden color, and there was a faint golden glow flowing around it. He couldn't imagine who could use such a huge sword to fight. Could it be that the person using the sword was like this crocodile, a giant? "Ah, little brother, you've seen it all. Not bad, this is my territory. I've been buried at the bottom of this lake for over 100,000 years. I'm lucky to be alive." The giant crocodile sighed with an old voice. This scene was too shocking. Yu Qianqiu tried to calm down and asked with difficulty, "Who are you?" "Ah." The giant crocodile was still lying motionless at the bottom of the lake. The old voice came from its head. "The underworld has 12 underworld generals, and the immortal world has 12 immortal monarchs. I'm one of the 12 immortal monarchs, Immortal Crocodile Monarch. People call me Lord Crocodile Monarch. This title was too big. It was even more unfamiliar than the Immortal Emperor, or the Underworld Emperor. He had never even heard of them before. Yu Qianqiu was deeply shocked. He awkwardly smiled and said, "Earlier, you said that, could it be that you really had the cultivation of an immortal emperor? Didn't you say that only one immortal emperor had that cultivation?" He was really afraid that this giant would suddenly go crazy. It was scary just thinking about it. Immortal Crocodile said sadly, as if recalling the past. In the immortal world, cultivation is divided into 4 levels: small immortal, exalted immortal, great immortal, and immortal emperor. In the underworld, cultivation is divided into 4 levels: underworld knight, underworld sage, underworld lord, and underworld emperor. They are all equal, and the strength of their cultivation is actually about the same. Each level is divided into 3 levels. Even immortal emperors are divided into early, middle, and late stages. In the immortal world, there are many people with immortal emperor cultivation, but only the 12 great immortal monarchs have reached the middle stage. As for the late stage immortal emperor, there is only one person, and only this person dares to call himself an emperor in the immortal world. He is Immortal Emperor Jin Tai. Yu Qianqiu nodded slightly as if he was deep in thought. He looked at the huge sword that nailed him to the point where he couldn't move at all and said, "In that case, you're an extraordinary figure in the immortal world. To be able to, I presume that the sword in your body is the main reason why you're trapped, right?" "Yes, I was nailed to the bottom of the lake by this sword. I have been trapped for more than 100,000 years, Immortal Crocodile admitted. Yu Qianqiu asked suspiciously, "You said you were beaten up by the Myriad Swords Demon Lord. Could it be that the Myriad Swords Demon Lord?" "It is the Myriad Swords Demon Lord." Immortal Crocodile gritted his teeth and interrupted him. "The sword that trapped me is one of the Myriad Swords Demon Lord swords. Otherwise, ordinary treasures would not have been able to trap me for so many years. Myriad Swords Demon Lord, one day, I will avenge this sword." Yu Qianqiu was stunned. It seemed that this old monster did not know that the Myriad Swords Demon Lord was already dead, and still wanted to seek revenge. But thinking about it, the Myriad Swords Demon Lord was killed by the Immortal Emperor and Emperor of the Underworld outside the East Holy Land. The people trapped in the East Holy Land naturally did not know. "Old monster, I'm afraid you will not have the chance to avenge yourself." Yu Qianqiu shook his head and sighed. "What do you mean? Do you want to kill me?" Immortal Crocodile's red eyes turned, and his gaze landed on the hundreds of flying swords in Yu Qianqiu's hands. "Little kid, who is the Myriad Swords Demon Lord to you?" Yu Qianqiu noticed his gaze, and immediately knew that he was thinking the wrong way. Immortal Crocodile probably saw him controlling so many flying swords at the same time, and mistook him for the Myriad Swords Demon Lord's disciple. He shook his head and chuckled. "Old monster, don't think the wrong way. The Myriad Swords Demon Lord has been dead for more than 100,000 years. How can I be related to him?" "The Myriad Swords Demon Lord is dead?" Immortal Crocodile paused, then repeated. "Did I hear wrongly? You said the Myriad Swords Demon Lord is dead?" Yu Qianqiu sneered. "So what if he is not dead? Are you a match for him?" "Don't worry. He is really dead. 100,000 years ago, he was killed by the Immortal Emperor and Emperor of the Underworld." Immortal Crocodile didn't believe him. "Impossible, don't lie to me. The Immortal Emperor and Emperor of the Underworld fought the Myriad Swords Demon Lord more than once, and they never got the upper hand. The two of them could not kill him." Yu Qianqiu waved his hand disapprovingly and said, "It's up to you whether you believe it or not. I don't know how he died, but I heard that he fell into a trap and was injured first. Later, the Immortal Emperor and Emperor of the Underworld worked together to kill him." "Trap? Injured first? Could it be?" Immortal Lord Crocodile muttered to himself. After a long time he sighed and said, "Looks like what you said is true." This old man was wondering why Wang Jian still hasn't taken back his treasured sword after so many years. So he has already fallen. Sigh. He let out a long sigh. Seeing that he had understood, Yu Qianqiu couldn't be bothered to explain further. He stared at the giant sword on his back. Old monster, according to what you said, you are a top expert in the immortal world. Could a sword trap you? Could it be that there is something special about this sword? Knowing that the myriad sword's demon lord was dead, immortal crocodile, who had been trapped for so many years, seemed to be a little dispirited. He replied in an aged voice. Myriad sword's cultivation was actually not much higher than the immortal emperor and emperor of the underworld. However, myriad swords had the help of the dragon god, and the 10,000 flying swords in his hands. One must know that the 10,000 flying swords were the truly powerful treasures. Once the 10,000 swords became one, it could kill immortals and gods alike. Think about it. How could mere immortals resist a treasure that even gods couldn't resist? Because of this, the immortal world and the underworld couldn't stop him, even if they joined forces. He relied on the sharpness of the 10,000 flying swords to kill them all. This is also why we call him the myriad swords demon lord. Yu Qianzhou's eyes lit up. He stared at the sword on immortal crocodile's body, almost glowing green. He swallowed and said, Is this sword that powerful? It can even kill gods. Old monster, you aren't lying to me, are you? Let me tell you, if you dare lie to me, I will make sure you die a horrible death. His expression was just short of drooling. Knowing that the myriad sword's demon lord was dead, immortal crocodile seemed to have lost his will to live. He couldn't be bothered to explain himself. He just sighed and said, Little brother, don't drool. Swords are good, but not everyone can control them. The sword that trapped me weighs 108,000 kilograms. With your early-stage tribulation cultivation, I'm afraid it will be difficult for you to even pick it up, let alone control it. You'd better give up on that idea. 108,000 kilograms? Yu Qianzhou exclaimed in shock. He looked at the sword on immortal crocodile's back in disbelief. Such a heavy sword could be controlled by the myriad sword's demon lord like a flying sword? Oh my! To control 10,000 swords at the same time. How strong must one's cultivation be? Damn it! Isn't this bullshit? Who would have nothing better to do and forge such a heavy sword? Yu Qianzhou didn't finish his sentence of letting people see it but not use it. In any case, he was very unhappy, because even if this treasured sword was given to him, he wouldn't be able to use it in a fight. If he really fought with his opponent, before he could even pull out the sword, his opponent would either run away or kill him. It was too heavy. Little brother, you're thinking the wrong way. No one can refine such a treasure. There is a distant legend about these 10,000 flying swords. Immortal crocodile sighed. Chapter 726. Yu Qianzhou also noticed that immortal Lord Crocodile's emotions were a little off. It seemed that ever since he found out that the myriad sword's demon lord was dead, his passionate will to beg for mercy had instantly collapsed. However, it was understandable. Imagine a person trapped at the bottom of this dark lake for more than 100,000 years. If he did not have a reason to live, even if he was an immortal, he would not be able to bear the burden of being trapped here for more than 100,000 years. Presumably, seeking revenge from the myriad sword's demon lord was the reason for his persistence in living. Now that he suddenly found out that the myriad sword's demon lord was dead, perhaps his only reason for living was suddenly gone. For a moment, he would definitely be disheartened and at a loss. Immortals were humans too. It was just that they were of different levels. If humans did not have emotions and desires, who would want to fight and kill? Oh, what legend? Yu Qianzhou smiled. I'm all ears. Before he finished speaking, immortal Lord Crocodile had already begun to speak slowly. It is said that in the distant past, there was no distinction between the immortal realm, the underworld, and the demon realm. It is said that at the beginning of the world, some of the oldest ancient gods existed in the world. They were the representatives of the first sentience of all living things, and each of them had great magical powers. There were fights between the ancient gods. Once 2 ancient gods fought, and one of them suffered a great loss. However, he could not defeat the other. In order to vent his anger, the defeated ancient god released 2 of the 3 souls and 7 spirits in a rage. They transformed into 9 suns, wanting to kill all living things in the world. Imagine that 10 suns appeared in the sky at once. How could the living things in the world survive? Even the sea would dry up. Hou shooting the suns. Yu Qianqiu could not help but exclaim. When someone mentioned the story of 10 sons, he could not help but associate it with Hou. Previously, Nongzhu had mentioned this to him, but it was about cultivation and had nothing to do with the myriad swords demon lord. That's right. It seems that you have heard of this legend. The other ancient deity, Shooting Sun, was called the Great Deity Yi. It was said that he had a bow in his hand called the Supreme Divine Bow. It had boundless power and could split the heavens and earth. The great god Yi was originally a fierce and combative person. When he saw the 10 suns in the sky causing misery and suffering to the living beings, he became kind and wanted to use his own power to completely quell the dispute. Therefore, he shot 9 suns with the Supreme Divine Bow. But this disaster was also caused by him, and he was also the one who ended it. One was positive, and one was negative. One was good and one was evil. It was hard to judge. In order to praise his kindness, the later generations named the great god, Yi who shot the sun as Hou, distinguishing him from the previous Yi. From then on, the world was divided into good and evil. This is also why you have heard of Hou shooting the sun. These 4 words represent justice and kindness. So that's how it is. Why are you talking to me about this? Yu Qianqiu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He suddenly realized that this old monster was a bit like a kindergarten teacher, educating him like a child. He said weakly, "What does this legend have to do with the 10,000 flying swords of the Thousand Swords Demon Monarch? You asked me about Hou shooting the sun. That's why I told you." Then continue what you said earlier." Immortal Crocodile paused and continued. When the 10 suns appeared, all living things suffered. The once boundless earth became hell on earth. The other ancient gods didn't want to participate in the battle between the two, so they joined forces to create another world, which is now the divine realm. In the end, there were only 2 ancient gods left in the world. In order to make up for the damage he had caused to the human world, the great god Yi finally decided to put an end to this dispute. So he also released 2 of the 3 spiritual and 7 physical souls, fusing them with the 9 heaven and earth splitting arrows. He pulled the Supreme Divine Bow and shot 9 arrows in a row. When the 9 arrows were shot, each arrow was earth-shattering, moving mountains and rivers. It is said that these 9 arrows didn't shoot down the sun, that was the incarnation of another great god in the sky. Instead, they split the human world into 10 worlds, and each arrow divided a space-time. The 9 arrows sent the 9 suns to 9 different spaces, and the 10 suns couldn't meet each other. From then on, there was only one sun in the sky. Yu Qianqiu's eyes were a little dazed. The 9 arrows divided 10 space-time, and the world he was in had also heard of the legend of Hou shooting the sun. This was definitely not a coincidence. Could it be that the space he was in his previous life was also one of the 10 spacetimes divided by Hou Yi's 9 arrows? Did he just travel from another space to this space? 2 worlds that were going in completely different directions had magically appeared at a point of intersection. They both mentioned the matter of Hou shooting the sun. What did this mean? He vaguely felt that the legend of Hou in this world was more reliable. This was because in his previous world, Hou shooting the sun was just a myth, but in this world, the myth was reality. It wasn't impossible to fly in the sky or burrow into the ground. If the legend of Hou in this world was true, then comparing the development directions of the 2 worlds, it was very likely that the 10 different spaces had all gone in different directions. And the real turning point was after Hou shot the sun. It is said that there was a god in the god realm who called the 9 arrows shot by the great god Yi the 9 solitary arrows, meaning that each arrow represented a lonely space. And the myriad swords demon monarch somehow obtained one of the 9 solitary arrows shot by the great god Yi. This 9 solitary arrows can be big or small, and can even split into 10,000 flying swords. After the 10,000 swords become one, they can reassemble into the 9 solitary arrows, which is the great god Yi's heaven and earth splitting arrows. Now you should know the origin of the 10,000 flying swords of the myriad swords demon monarch, right? Now you should know the power of these 10,000 flying swords, right? Heaven and earth splitting arrows. 9 solitary arrows. Yu Qianqiu shook his head, feeling that this matter sounded a little too fantastical. He organized his thoughts and asked, that is to say, there should be 9 solitary arrows, but they exist in different space-time and spaces. And the one in this space was coincidentally obtained by the Myriad Swords demon monarch. Is that what you mean? If the legend is completely true, then that should be the case. Immortal Lord Crocodile said slowly. TSK. In that case, the flying sword that suppressed you was one of the divine artifact clones. No wonder you couldn't escape. Yu Qianqiu chuckled. Immortal Lord Crocodile smiled bitterly. Little brother, you're wrong. No matter how powerful a divine artifact is, if there's no one to wield it, it won't be able to unleash its power. The reason why this sword can suppress me is not because of its weight, which is nothing to me. It's also not because it's a divine artifact. If there's no one to wield it, it can't unleash any divine power. To put it bluntly, when there's no one to wield it, it's not even as good as a divine artifact refined by the celestial world's artifact refiners. With an artifact's spirit integrated into it, it has a tacit understanding with its master, and can automatically attack. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. It can't be that weak. Then why can't you escape? Immortal Lord Crocodile said helplessly. This is also my bad luck. My 3 spiritual and 7 physical souls happened to be nailed by it. Even so, I still had a way to escape. After all, this sword wasn't enough to kill me. Even if I didn't use my cultivation, I could shake it off with my physical body. But every 9 solitary arrows was infused with Great God Yi's soul. And this sword has remnants of Great God Yi's soul. Even if it's a remnant soul, it's still Great God Yi's. Too powerful. After nailing my life soul, it directly shocked my 3 spiritual and 7 physical souls, to the point that I couldn't move at all. You should be able to understand this, right? When a person loses their 3 spiritual and 7 physical souls, they lose the ability to act independently. They are like a walking corpse, unable to control their own bodies. As you can see, I lay here motionless for 100,000 years. Aha! I'm really quite unlucky. That's not right. Yu Qianqiu snorted coldly. Old monster, you must be lying to me. Then what's with those crocodile clones of yours? You can't use your cultivation, but you can still make clones. Who are you lying to? Sigh. You don't know, but I actually don't know what's going on either. Immortal Lord Crocodile said curiously. I don't know the reason either. About every 300 years, Great God Yi's remnant soul suppresses me for a period of time. If not, I wouldn't be able to use my cultivation to communicate with you. But although it's weak, I still maintain the suppression. But it's this little bit of loosening that allows me to use a little of my cultivation. Every 300 years, I can use my natal blood essence to create a small crocodile clone. With a little more time, as long as I have enough crocodiles, they can unite and help me remove this sword. But who knew that I would meet you? And hundreds of my crocodiles died. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. It probably had something to do with the East Holy Land, that opened once every 300 years. But then he narrowed his eyes and said in a low voice, What's with that big crocodile? Why didn't I see it? As he spoke, he looked around at the bottom of the lake. There's no need to look. Immortal Lord Crocodile sighed. Lying at the bottom of the lake, its 100-meter-long body started to glow with white light. The white light gradually gathered above it. Suddenly, the white light disappeared, and a 20-meter-long crocodile shook its head and tail, moving around fiercely. Yu Qianqiu was shocked and immediately became alert. He said sternly, Old monster, what's the meaning of this? But Immortal Lord Crocodile didn't reply. When Yu Qianqiu was about to attack the crocodile, it immediately turned into a white light and shot back into Immortal Lord Crocodile's body. The cultivation I can use is limited. After creating it, I can't answer you anymore. Immortal Lord Crocodile sighed. Is this an illusion? But why does it have the ability to attack with a physical body? I'm also of the water race, so I know a little about controlling water. The combination of illusion and water control resulted in the physical attack you saw. So that's how it is? Yu Qianqiu asked suspiciously. Since you can control water, Why don't you use the power of water to remove this sword? Little brother, you really have a lot of questions. Immortal Lord Crocodile sighed. This is already the limit of my water control. If not with your cultivation, how could you use 6 spears to repel its attack? If you can't even block the spears you threw, how can you remove this heavy sword? Chapter 727. Why did you attack the tribe near the lake? Yu Qianqiu asked with a cold look in his eyes. Are you going to attack me if you're not satisfied with my answer? Immortal Lord Crocodile laughed. He was one of the 12 great immortal lords of the immortal world. But now he was being interrogated by a tribulation transcendence cultivator. Wasn't it funny? Behind the humor was a sense of desolation. Yu Qianqiu stared at him silently. He didn't say yes or no, waiting for a reply. However, his expression was a little cold. Immortal Lord Crocodile sighed. If you don't speak, it means you agree. The reason is very simple. Although the little crocodiles are my clones, they are still flesh and blood. They have to eat. But they don't dare to attack the tribe on such a large scale, for fear of attracting unexpected trouble. But because of the loosening of the suppression once every 300 years, I thought that the big crocodiles could protect the little crocodiles. So I wanted to let them have a good meal. Who knew that I would get into trouble and meet you? I understand, Yu Qianqiu replied calmly. The surrounding green flying swords hovered in the air, ready to attack. Haha, looks like you have to kill me. Immortal Lord Crocodile smiled bitterly. So this is the result of waiting for more than 100,000 years. If I had known, I wouldn't have endured. Forget it, I'll die. Anyway, even if you don't kill me, I don't have the willpower and ability to continue suffering. Yu Qianqiu said expressionlessly. Why are you so pessimistic? His words were comforting, but there was no consolation in his tone. I've been deceiving myself. Immortal Lord Crocodile laughed sadly. More than 100,000 years of suffering. In order to maintain this old life, my cultivation has been consumed day after day. Now, my cultivation has fallen from mid-stage immortal emperor to late-stage exalted immortal. Even if I go out, with my current cultivation, there is no one in the world who can speak for me. Why should I go out and humiliate myself? A huge silver-white body, hundreds of meters long, lay quietly at the bottom of the dark lake, covered by mud. It had not moved for 100,000 years. That pair of big red eyes, the only thing that could move, slowly closed, waiting for the end of fate. Yu Qianqiu nodded slightly. He could understand Immortal Lord Crocodile's feelings. It was like a boss being released after serving his sentence, only to be reduced to carrying shoes for his underling. For many people, this was a huge gap, and it was very difficult to bear. Most importantly, the enemy that he could not forget, the Myriad Swords Demon Monarch, had fallen, causing him to lose his will to fight. If the Myriad Swords Demon Monarch was still here, he might have endured the humiliation and started all over again. But now, everything was over. Yu Qianqiu was silent for a moment before he said, I can't find a reason not to kill you. Keeping you alive won't do me any good, and it might even bring trouble to myself in the future. However, you can give me a reason not to kill you, or you can take out some benefits to bribe me. You don't have to say anything else. I just want to die. Besides, do I look like someone who can give you any benefits? I have a small fortune in the immortal world, but after so many years, I'm afraid it has already fallen into someone else's hands. Besides, with your cultivation, you can't go to the immortal world. Immortal Lord Crocodile closed his eyes and smiled calmly. Little brother, do it. I won't resist. I just want you to give me a quick death. If we are fated in the next life, I will thank you again. The trace of compassion that had just arisen completely disappeared, and Yu Qianqiu said coldly, Immortal Lord Crocodile, then I'm sorry. He was a decisive person, and since he had already made up his mind, he did not hesitate to attack. Hundreds of cyan silhouettes let out a buzzing noise in the water, piercing through the water along with sharp cyan lights, creating circles of dazzling cyan light. A series of duo sounds rang out, and hundreds of green flying swords all hit their targets. In an instant, hundreds of green dots of light bloomed on Immortal Lord Crocodile's back. They were the hilts of the green flying swords. They had not completely sunk into the thick leather armor, and some of them were still exposed. Immortal Lord Crocodile's eyes suddenly opened, and his huge red eyes stared at Yu Qianqiu with an inexplicable expression. Meanwhile, the corners of Yu Qianqiu's mouth twitched. This old monster's skin was too thick and sturdy. Even the sharpness of the green flying swords could not penetrate his skin, as expected of an old monster that had lived for hundreds of thousands of years. Little brother, we are fated to meet, and we have been chatting for so long. What is your name? Immortal Lord Crocodile suddenly asked. Yu Qianqiu scratched his head, a little embarrassed. Yu Qianqiu. It was as if he was ashamed to mention his own name. Well, it was indeed a little embarrassing that the other party was lying there without resisting, and he couldn't even kill him. Yu Qianqiu, don't hold back. I don't blame you. I just want a quick end to this. Immortal Lord Crocodile said solemnly. There was really no resentment in his tone, as if he was afraid that Yu Qianqiu would be soft-hearted. So he comforted him with kind words. Okay, I'll try again. Yu Qianqiu floated in the water, waving his arms and slowly pulling out the green flying swords that were deeply embedded in Immortal Lord Crocodile's skin. In an instant, the swords circled and danced in the water. As Yu Qianqiu pointed with a ferocious expression, hundreds of flying swords shot out wildly. Duo sounds rang out again, but the result was the same as before. The sword hilts were exposed and did not penetrate deep. There was a brief silence in the lake. Yu Qianqiu was dumbfounded. Immortal Lord Crocodile was also speechless. His big red eyes turned, and then he revealed an expression of not knowing whether to laugh or cry. He had not fought with a tribulation-passing cultivator for many years. Even with his immortal emperor cultivation back then, he did not have the opportunity to fight with a tribulation-passing cultivator. He had almost forgotten that a tribulation-passing cultivator wanted to break through his body's natural defense, which was the nearly 2-meter-thick leather armor. It was probably just a little bit off. Yu Qianqiu's flying swords could penetrate his skin, which was already considered a good result for a tribulation-passing cultivator. What he did not know was that Yu Qianqiu was relying on the sharpness of the green flying swords. Damn it! I don't believe it. The moment Yu Qianqiu cursed, it meant that he was angry out of humiliation. He had never seen such an embarrassing thing. He spread out his arms, and green light flashed continuously. In an instant, all 3,000 green flying swords appeared. Immortal Lord Crocodile was slightly shocked by his desperate look. Go! Yu Qianqiu waved his arms and shouted angrily. The green light in the lake shot toward Immortal Lord Crocodile's body like a meteor shower. But it did not have any effect. The dense green light spots inlaid on the silver-white leather were pulled out and circled again, moving up and down according to Yu Qianqiu's hand gestures. In an instant, the green light in the lake shuttled back and forth like rain, and the sound of it hitting the leather was endless. Yu Qianqiu was completely enraged. He didn't believe that the sharpness of the blue flame flying sword couldn't break the old monster's skin. Then he would bombard the old monster indiscriminately. There would come a time when the old monster's skin would be torn apart. Immortal Lord Crocodile was shocked by such an unruly move. No one would want to see themselves die like this. Even if the defense of his skin was broken, with this guy's cultivation, he would not be able to kill him in 1 or 2 moves. If he used this method, he would definitely not be killed by him, but tortured to death. Wait! Yu Qianqiu, wait! Immortal Lord Crocodile's voice trembled as he tried to stop him. The green light stopped for a moment. Yu Qianqiu stared at Immortal Lord Crocodile with bloodshot eyes and said in a low voice, What's wrong? Old monster, do you want to go back on your word and not die? Let me tell you, no way. It's too late to regret now. Again. Wait. Immortal Lord Crocodile said fearfully. Yu Qianqiu, I didn't go back on my word, but you promised to give me a quick death. I'm scared to see you cut me like this. Are you sure you can give me a quick death like this? Yu Qianqiu woke up from his madness. He looked at the silver leather that was riddled with holes from his flying swords, but had not been broken. He was also stunned. After a moment of silence, he said awkwardly, I have an idea. It'll work this time. Immortal Lord Crocodile said fearfully. Are you sure? Yu Qianqiu, don't scare me. Let me die in peace, okay? He had never thought that he would end up scaring himself by trying to kill himself. It seemed that it was better to continue living than to die this way. The disheartened Immortal Lord Crocodile began to waver. Don't worry. I have a lot of tricks up my sleeves. Yu Qianqiu smiled sheepishly. Close your eyes. You won't be so scared if you don't look. I'll definitely give you a quick death. Okay, I'll trust you one more time. Immortal Lord Crocodile closed his eyes decisively. He really didn't want to look anymore. Go. Yu Qianqiu's arms formed a sword seal, and the 3,000 flying swords shot out explosively. With a burst of duo sounds, all of them stabbed into the enormous body. Immortal Lord Crocodile's eyelids moved slightly. He wanted to open his eyes to take a look, but he resisted. Yu Qianqiu suddenly clapped his hands and shouted angrily, Burn! With a boom, the 3,000 flying swords all burst into raging cyan flames and attached themselves to the enormous silver-white body, burning it. This was an extraordinary performance for him. Setting fire underwater required a delicate balance, and he had to use both water and fire arts at the same time. The cannibals anxiously waited on the lakeside. They had waited until the eastern sky began to brighten. It was almost dawn, but Yu Qianqiu still had not come out of the water. Although these people lived primitive and barbaric lives, they were kind-hearted. Everyone stared at the lake for the entire night, hoping for a miracle to happen. The cannibals, led by Chief Garland, quietly waited by the lake. They could not help but show a trace of despair in their eyes. But at this moment, the entire lake in front of them suddenly emitted a faint green light, making the moon lake as beautiful as a gem. Everyone looked at each other. They did not know what was happening at the bottom of the lake, but their eyes shone with hope again. Chapter 728. At the bottom of the lake, 300 to 400 meters deep, green flames spread, covering Immortal Lord Crocodile's body and burning it angrily. According to Yu Qianqiu's estimation, as long as Immortal Lord Crocodile did not resist, the high temperature of the green fire should be able to burn him to death. The process might not be pleasant, but he had fulfilled half of his promise to Immortal Lord Crocodile. Kill him. After half an hour, Yu Qianqiu stared down, his face darkening. He could clearly see what was happening under the fire. It seemed that Immortal Lord Crocodile's skin did not change at all under the burning of the green fire. Immortal Lord Crocodile, who was under the fire, also felt the high temperature, but Yu Qianqiu did not kill him. After waiting for a while, he finally opened one eye to peek. It would have been fine if he had not seen it, but the moment he saw it, he was startled. His eyes flew open, and he cried out involuntarily, Qing Hua. Haha. Yu Qianqiu laughed awkwardly. Old monster, don't be impatient. Just wait a little longer, and I will definitely burn you to death. Yu Qianqiu, is this what you mean by giving me a quick death? Immortal Lord Crocodile roared angrily. Put away your green fire, it's useless to me. Useless? Why is it useless? Yu Qianqiu believed that he would not lie, because he also realized that the green fire could not burn him. He opened his arms, and the large area of green fire turned into several fire dragons and entered his sleeves. Immortal Lord Crocodile stared at him as he absorbed the green fire into his body. He asked in shock, Where did you come from? How can you store the Samadhi true fire in your body? This is rare even in the celestial world. This is not something that can be found in the human world. You're going to die anyway. Why do you care about this? Yu Qianqiu said casually. He asked curiously, Why is your body so powerful? You're not afraid of the green fire when you're not resisting. What's going on? Immortal Lord Crocodile said angrily. Haven't you noticed that I'm different from ordinary crocodiles? I can see it at a glance. It was bigger than the average crocodile. The strangest thing is that it's actually silvery white in color. To tell you the truth, this is the first time I've seen it. Yu Qianqiu clicked his tongue. T. I'm a primordial mutant. I'm born extraordinary, and I'm unique in the 3 realms. It would be strange if you've seen someone else. Immortal Lord Crocodile said proudly. I was born impervious to fire and water, and I'm immune to all poisons. My cultivation speed is also faster than ordinary people. It's an innate divine ability. What right do you think I have to become one of the 12 great immortal monarchs of the immortal world? Others might be afraid of your green fire, but this old man doesn't care. Yu Qianqiu was surprised. So it's a rare animal. No wonder you didn't react at all when I said I was going to burn you with green fire. You were born to be impervious to fire and water. Impressive. By the way, does this fire have any effect on you? With a flip of his palm, a ball of black flame suddenly rose from the center of his palm, and the surrounding temperature instantly dropped. He was prepared to make a move after getting a clear understanding of the situation, lest he wasted his efforts. Immortal Lord Crocodile's bright red pupil shrank, and he exclaimed, "Black fire? You actually have black fire, one of the Samadhi true fires in your body?" Yu Qianqiu rolled his eyes and said, "Don't make a fuss. Let's get to the point. Can black fire kill you?" Yu Qianqiu, have you already cultivated the Samadhi true fire? Immortal Lord Crocodile had just finished speaking when he quickly denied it. Impossible. Rumor has it that those who can cultivate such an amazing technique are all people who have reached the peak of the celestial world. With your cultivation, it's not enough to fuse 3 types of fire into the Samadhi true fire. His big red eyes were filled with disbelief, as if he had seen a monster. It was difficult for him to get back to the topic at hand. No, I'm still missing 1 type of purple fire. Why? Look at your surprised expression. Is the Samadhi true fire very powerful? Yu Qianqiu showed a humble expression. It's more than powerful. Immortal Lord Crocodile's tone was solemn. The Samadhi true fire is invincible and can refine anything. It's the true fire that refiners dream of, and it's also the nemesis of cultivators in the 3 realms. The tyrannical part of the true Samadhi fire was that no matter how high one's cultivation was, even if one's cultivation was strong enough to withstand its burning, once one was trapped by it, regardless of whether one was human, devil, demon, ghost, or immortal, it would rapidly burn one's cultivation. When you can't withstand it anymore, it will immediately refine you to the point where you'll never be able to reincarnate. This thing is a taboo even for the immortal emperor and the emperor of the underworld. So if anyone in the celestial world has cultivated the Samadhi true fire, immortal Emperor Jin Tai will kill them at all costs. The threat is too great, and it's simply untouchable. It's that powerful. Yu Qianqiu rubbed his chin with one hand, his eyes flashing. After a while, he stared at Immortal Lord Crocodile and asked, "Old monster, tell me honestly, where can I find the purple fire? If you dare to hide it from me, I'll kill you immediately." Immortal Lord Crocodile paused, then suddenly burst into laughter. "You're really not a good person. I'm already lying here motionless, waiting for you to kill me. Why do you still have to threaten me?" The fierce expression on Yu Qianqiu's face froze, and he immediately reacted. His aura immediately weakened, and he put on a fawning smile. "Immortal Lord Crocodile, since you don't want to live anymore, just tell me where the purple fire is, okay?" Immortal Crocodile let out a long sigh and said, "Yu Qianqiu, I advise you not to be too ambitious. With your current cultivation, even if you successfully cultivate the Samadhi true fire, it will only bring you harm. Once the news reaches Immortal Emperor Jin Tai's ears, he definitely won't let you go. He'll guarantee your death. You haven't seen how terrifying Jin Tai is, and you can't imagine it." Yu Qianqiu said disdainfully, "I can't even live my life now, and I'm always racking my brains to wander around. I don't care about Jin Tai or Yin Tai in the future. I'll just let the present be peaceful first. Just tell me where I can find the purple fire, and you don't have to worry about the rest." "You've got guts, kid. You don't even care about Immortal Emperor Jin Tai." Immortal Lord Crocodile was first impressed, then said, "I don't know where to find the purple fire either. The purple fire is the source of energy that sustains the operation of a realm. It's extremely powerful, and at the same time, invisible and traceless. Very few people can find it. It's said that the purple fire operates according to the laws of heaven. It might be right next to you, or it might be thousands of miles away, or it might be scattered all over the world, and those who are not fated to find it will not be able to find it. Yu Qianqiu was stunned and said in astonishment, "It's so mysterious? Doesn't that mean I might never find the purple fire in my lifetime?" "Yes, that should be the case. But I do know some information about the purple fire in this realm. Maybe it can help you find it," Immortal Lord Crocodile said with a smile. "Where?" Yu Qianqiu's eyes lit up, and he said in surprise, "Tell me quickly." "I can tell you, but you have to promise me one thing." Immortal Lord Crocodile's laughter contained a hint of treachery, as if he had finally found something to use against him. "You're threatening me? Let me tell you, I don't fall for that." Yu Qianqiu's face immediately darkened, but after a while, he smiled again and said, "I'm just joking with you. If you have any requests, just tell me. As long as it's within my power, I'll definitely do it for you." He patted his chest so loudly that it was almost swollen. He was full of pride, and his words were worth their weight in gold. Despicable person. A complete despicable person. This old man was wrong. If I were to die in your hands, I would really die with regrets. Luckily, this old man came to his senses early. Immortal Lord Crocodile cursed for a while, then said indifferently, "This old man suddenly doesn't want to die anymore. As long as you find a way to pull the sword out of my body, I'll tell you about the purple fire." "You don't want to die anymore?" Yu Qianqiu asked curiously. "You just asked me to give you a quick death." He did not think that after chatting with Immortal Lord Crocodile for such a long time, and chatting so well with him, Immortal Lord Crocodile's disheartened desire to die had been rekindled. This was no less than a psychologist's counseling. Immortal Lord Crocodile suddenly realized that it was actually quite good to be alive. After all, he had persevered for so many years, and now that he had a chance, he naturally had to grasp it. T. Immortal Lord Crocodile said angrily, "You stabbed me full of holes, and I'm still alive and well. You call that giving me a quick death? If I let you torment me any further, I'll be scared to death by you. With your little ability, you won't be able to give me a quick death. You can only torture me. I don't want to die now. You just need to tell me if you agree or not. Otherwise, there's no need to talk." "Who says I can't give you a quick death?" Yu Qianqiu flashed the black fire in his palm. "Don't I still have black fire here? I haven't tried it yet." To be honest, he did not want to let Immortal Lord Crocodile go. If he let such a powerful person out, who knew what he would do to him? "There's no need to try. Black fire is invincible in the mortal world, but it's useless against people from the reincarnated immortal realm, netherworld realm, and demon realm. The people of the three realms have already been reborn, and have lost the vitality of the mortal world. Your black fire won't be of any use at all. To me, it's even worse than blue fire. Unless you have the purple fire or the Samadhi true fire, it's useless," Immortal Lord Crocodile said impatiently. "How will you know if you don't try?" Without another word, Yu Qianqiu quickly condensed the black fire in his palm into a black flying sword. With a whoosh, it shot directly at the huge body below. In the end, there was a muffled poof. It was as if it had been defeated, and could not even stab into the body. It was indeed inferior to the blue fire flying sword. Under Immortal Lord Crocodile's angry glare, Yu Qianqiu smiled sheepishly. "I tried. It's really useless." The black sword flew back into his sleeve. "I'll ask you again. Do you agree or not?" Immortal Lord Crocodile threatened. "I won't say this a third time. If you miss this opportunity, even if you agree, I won't tell you anything about the purple fire." "Old monster, you're playing this game with me. Do you really think I'm scared?" Yu Qianqiu snorted coldly. "I'll let you see how powerful I am. If this doesn't let you die a quick death, I'll agree." With that, he closed his eyes. Immortal Lord Crocodile swallowed the words that were on the tip of his tongue. He looked at Yu Qianqiu suspiciously and curiously, not knowing what he was up to. Suddenly, he saw a stream of water carrying a fish that weighed more than 5 kilograms. Yu Qianqiu opened his eyes, and casually waved his hand at the fish. Immortal Lord Crocodile's eyes widened. A lively fish turned into a skinny dried fish in the blink of an eye. It floated unsteadily between his eyes on the bridge of his nose. Chapter 729. Its two big red eyes stared at the dried fish on the bridge of its nose. It looked scary and cute at the same time, and one could not help but laugh. Yu Qianqiu asked cheerfully, "How is it? This should give you a quick death, right?" He was not in a hurry to kill Immortal Lord Crocodile. He had to get information about the purple flames first. He wanted to scare him with the fish first. Immortal Lord Crocodile took a while to recover and asked, "How did you do it?" When Yu Qianqiu heard that there was hope, he touched his palm and threatened, "I advise you to tell me about the purple flame. Otherwise, I will turn you into a dried crocodile and drag you ashore for the cannibals to slowly enjoy." Staring at him with its big red eyes, Immortal Lord Crocodile said in a low voice, "You're not a good person at all. I'm afraid that if I tell you, you'll kill me immediately. You're worrying too much. My reputation is well known outside. I have always been honest with both the old and the young, and I always keep my word." Yu Qianqiu waved his hand indifferently. "As long as you tell me about the purple flames, I'll definitely find a way to pull the sword out for you. Don't give me that. I've lived for so many years, and I've seen all kinds of people. People like you are the most unreliable." Immortal Lord Crocodile said firmly, "Just one sentence. Help me pull the sword out, and I'll definitely tell you about the purple flames. Otherwise, no matter how you threaten me, I'm already half dead. Do whatever you want to me." "Do you really think I don't dare to kill you?" Yu Qianqiu shouted. His ruthless nature exploded, and he looked like he was ready to kill at any moment. Hearing this, Immortal Lord Crocodile slowly closed his eyes, acting like a dead pig that was not afraid of boiling water. Yu Qianqiu immediately lost his temper. If he was not greedy for the purple flames, he would definitely kill him immediately. The point was that he really wanted the purple flames. He was used to doing whatever it took to achieve his goals. To put it nicely, he was flexible, but to put it bluntly, he was a despicable person. The two were in a stalemate for a while. Immortal Lord Crocodile seemed certain that Yu Qianqiu would not dare to kill him. He lay there without opening his eyes. Yu Qianqiu gritted his teeth. "Old monster, you win. I can help you pull the sword out. But how do I know that you won't go back on your word after you get out? With your ability, if you were to try to kill me, wouldn't I suffer a great loss?" Immortal Lord Crocodile finally opened his eyes slowly and said in a low voice, "Don't worry. I'm more trustworthy than you are. As long as you help me get out of trouble, I will be extremely grateful. Why would I harm you? Don't give me that." "Normally, people who boast about their trustworthiness often don't keep their word," said Yu Qianqiu disdainfully. These words were a little like measuring others by oneself. Immortal Lord Crocodile sneered. "You're talking about yourself, right? No matter who I'm talking about, you have to make me feel safe. Otherwise, I'll be frank with you. I'd rather kill the wrong person than let you go." Yu Qianqiu scowled. This was indeed his bottom line. No matter how good the purple flames were, they were not as important as his life. If he lost his life, so what if he had the purple flames? Immortal Lord Crocodile was silent. He could understand what Yu Qianqiu was thinking. If he did not believe his words, how could Yu Qianqiu believe his words? After a pause, he said, "Then what do you want? How about this? I can make an oath first. As long as you tell me about the purple flame, I will help you pull out the sword. This should be enough sincerity, right?" Yu Qianqiu said with a sincere expression. In his heart, however, he was thinking that once he knew about the purple flames, he would kill Immortal Lord Crocodile first, and then help him pull the sword out. That would not be breaking the oath. "Sincerity, my ass." Immortal Lord Crocodile sneered. "I've lived for so long, and I've never seen anyone get retribution for breaking an oath. I've never believed in swearing an oath." Yu Qianqiu was stunned and said in astonishment, "No way. There won't be retribution for breaking an oath?" This was a little subversive of his beliefs in the cultivation world. "That's right. There will be retribution for breaking an oath. But that's human retribution, not heavenly retribution. I'll get retribution just because I said a few words? Isn't that child's play? If oaths were really that magical, the three realms would have been peaceful long ago. Why would I be trapped here?" Immortal Lord Crocodile suddenly said in a mocking tone. "How about this? I swear that you let me go first, and then I'll tell you about the purple flames?" Yu Qianqiu was speechless. He did not want to let the old monster out at all. He wanted to take advantage of the loophole in the oath to kill the old monster. Who knew that oaths were like farts in the old monster's eyes? Wouldn't he be asking for trouble if he let the old monster go? If he really did that, he would be an idiot. He said helplessly, "Forget it then. I knew you were up to no good." Immortal Lord Crocodile said sarcastically. Yu Qianqiu frowned in deep thought. This was indeed a difficult problem to solve. The crux of the problem was that neither side believed in the other's promises. If he wanted both sides to compromise, he had to think of a solution that would satisfy both sides. After thinking for a while, his eyes suddenly lit up. He remembered that day on Obedient Island, when he had talked with Bai Changchun all night. Bai Changchun had casually mentioned the matter between the Myriad Swords Demon Lord and the Dragon God. He wondered if it was true. Have you ever heard of forming a blood alliance? Yu Qianqiu suddenly asked. Forming a blood alliance? Immortal Lord Crocodile was stunned, then immediately refused. No, you must be joking. With your cultivation level, you don't deserve to form a blood alliance with me. If I really do that, I'll suffer a huge loss. Isn't a blood alliance equal? Why would you suffer a loss? Yu Qianqiu asked curiously. He remembered Bai Changchun saying that the Myriad Swords Demon Lord and the Dragon God only got together after forming a blood alliance of mutual equality. Bai Changchun didn't know the specifics. Yes, it's equal. A blood alliance is like a blood alliance between mortals. It means to face difficulties together and not to harm each other. Logically speaking, this method is very suitable. But the difference in cultivation level between us is too great. If I encounter any trouble, can you help me deal with it? In other words, if I'm in trouble, you can only watch. And if you're in trouble, I won't have such a good life. Once someone violates the true meaning of forming a blood alliance, they will immediately suffer the backlash of the alliance blood. Only you can think of such a method of harming others to benefit yourself. Do you think I'm a 3-year-old? Immortal Lord Crocodile said angrily. So that's how it is. Yu Qianqiu nodded and muttered to himself. He looked strangely at the huge body below and coughed. Since you're afraid of suffering a loss, how about this? I'll take a step back. As long as you form a blood alliance with me, I can bring you out of the Holy East Lands. Are you satisfied now? Holy East Lands? What Holy East Lands? What does Holy East Lands mean? Immortal Lord Crocodile asked blankly. Yu Qianqiu stared blankly and was truly somewhat speechless. However, thinking about it, it made sense. This group of people trapped in the East Holy Land probably didn't know that the people outside called this place the East Holy Land. So he explained solemnly, "What I mean is, I can bring you out of this land that's sealed by the heaven and earth formation. Do you understand?" Immortal Lord Crocodile was shocked. "What did you say? You can bring me out of this damn place sealed by the heaven and earth formation?" Yu Qianqiu, don't lie to me. Everyone who had been trapped with him wanted to escape, but after going through so many difficulties, they all knew how powerful the heaven and earth formation was. They didn't have the ability to get out. Who would have thought that the guy in front of him would say that he could get out? How could he not be shocked? There's hope, Yu Qianqiu said disdainfully. Why would I lie to you? I just came from the outside. I'm just here to play. I'll go back when I'm bored. If you don't believe me, there's nothing I can do. Okay, I promise you. I'll form a blood alliance with you. Immortal Lord Crocodile agreed without hesitation. Then he controlled his agitated emotions and said in a low voice, "But listen carefully. Once you form a blood alliance with me, and help me get out of the heaven and earth formation, you should help me solve the problem. If you don't help me, you'll be devoured by the alliance blood. If you're lying to me, I'll kill you even if I have to suffer the backlash of the alliance blood." Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and said boldly, "No problem." Then he said weakly, "By the way, I don't know how to form a blood alliance. Teach me how to do it first." Okay. Immortal Lord Crocodile immediately taught him the process of casting the spell. There was something to learn, so Yu Qianqiu paid 120% attention and asked in detail what he didn't understand. Fortunately, this was not a powerful spell. It was just a strange oath method that had never been seen before in the human world. It didn't take a long time to cultivate. Although it was a little complicated, One taught sincerely, and the other learned diligently. The latter quickly mastered it. After learning it, Yu Qianqiu, an immortal Lord Crocodile, agreed to start. Yu Qianqiu muttered an incantation and began to cast a spell. He made a cut on his index finger, and his fingertip moved quickly in the air before him. Within a 1-meter square blood circle, densely packed lines and Sanskrit words began to appear. At the same time, immortal Lord Crocodile controlled the water to form a water arrow and shot it into his mouth through the gap between his fangs. A dark red blood snake came out, and its agile steps automatically formed a pattern that looked like what Yu Qianqiu had drawn. When both of them finished casting the spell, Yu Qianqiu pointed at the blood totem in front of him. The blood totem slowly flew toward the blood totem, flying from immortal Lord Crocodile. The two blood totems merged with each other without any difference, as if their hearts were connected. Then, the two blood totems crossed and passed through each other, each emitting a dazzling red light. They formed two beams of red light that shot into Yu Qianqiu and immortal Lord Crocodile's bodies. Yu Qianqiu checked his body and felt no discomfort. He heaved a sigh of relief and asked, "Is this done?" "It's done," immortal Lord Crocodile said excitedly. "Yu Qianqiu, quickly help me remove this sword." He couldn't wait any longer. "Old monster, it's a piece of cake." "No problem. Watch me." Yu Qianqiu laughed and flew toward the huge silver body below. After landing on immortal Lord Crocodile's back, he couldn't help but step on it. After all, there weren't many opportunities to step on an expert like this. He asked, "Old monster, you don't mind if I step on you to borrow strength, right?" Chapter 730. No, go ahead. Immortal Lord Crocodile replied straightforwardly. He did not have the time to care about that now, nor would he think about Yu Qianqiu's evil intentions. Hee. Yu Qianqiu squatted down with a smile and touched the thick silvery white leather armor, with a rare look on his face. It was really rare. He looked around and realized how small he was squatting on it. He could not help but say, "Old monster, you're really big. If you go out, you'll definitely scare people." "Yu Qianqiu, stop dawdling and get down to business first. Don't tell me you don't have the ability to pull it out." Immortal Lord Crocodile screamed. "You're underestimating me." Yu Qianqiu snorted coldly. "Even if it weighs 1,080,000 kilograms, I'll still pull it out." He was not boasting. He had already planned that if he really could not pull it out, he would immediately mobilize a team from Utopia. With everyone working together, there was no reason they could not pull it out. Okay. Then stop dawdling and pull it out." Immortal Lord Crocodile could not wait any longer. Yu Qianqiu walked to the giant sword that pinned immortal Lord Crocodile and looked it up and down. He could not help but be amazed. The dark golden body of the sword faintly glowed with a golden treasure light, dyeing him golden as well. After being buried in water and mud for so many years, the body of the sword was still shiny. He could feel the majestic aura from the body of the sword before he even touched it. It was indeed not an ordinary object. He walked around the giant sword twice but found a problem. The sword was too big, and he really did not know where to start. He reached out to push it, but it did not move. He pushed it again with all his strength, but it still did not move. Immortal Lord Crocodile also felt it and said sadly, "I forgot to tell you, the body of the sword is stuck in the rock under me. If you want to pull it out, I'm afraid it will not be as simple as 108,000 kilograms of strength." "Can you shut up? If I say I'll pull it out for you, I'll pull it out. Why are you being so long-winded?" Yu Qianqiu angrily kicked the sword twice. Immortal Lord Crocodile sighed slightly and shut his mouth in disappointment. "Damn it. Only such a big sword can pin you down. It's a perfect match." Yu Qianqiu reached out and stroked the blade of the sword. Suddenly his eyebrows twitched. He could not help but infuse his divine sense to check it out. As a result, as soon as his divine sense touched the sword, he immediately sensed an ancient aura that deterred the world. It shook back his divine sense that wanted to invade the sword. His divine sense was crazily forced back, and a majestic ancient aura bounced over. Yu Qianqiu didn't have time to react, and was suddenly shaken to the point of vomiting a mouthful of blood. He himself was sent flying. Immortal Crocodile immediately exclaimed, "You Qianqiu, are you crazy? How dare you use your divine sense to check it? Didn't I tell you? The sword contains the remnant of the great god Yi's soul. It's not something you can peek at with your low cultivation. You must be tired of living. Are you okay?" Yu Qianqiu, who had fallen on the silver armor more than 10 meters away, struggled to get up. His chest was swollen, and he felt a sweetness in his throat. He spat out another mouthful of blood, which spread in the lake. He spat out the blood, and his breathing was much smoother. However, his face was frighteningly pale. His divine sense had been damaged in an instant. If not for the water's resistance, he would have been sent flying more than 10 meters away. At the same time, the water's resistance helped him absorb a lot of the force. Otherwise, he would have been seriously injured. "I'm fine, just a small injury." Yu Qianqiu looked at the dark golden giant sword in horror. He was speechless. This sword is too domineering. He stopped halfway, and his eyes were a little dazed. "Don't use your divine sense to check it again. Even if it's the remnant of the great god Yi's soul, it's not something you can withstand with your current cultivation. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been suppressed for so many years." Immortal Crocodile also paused in shock. The blood that Yu Qianqiu had spat out earlier lingered in the water like a red mist. When the red mist touched the giant sword, the treasure light around the giant sword suddenly stopped. Then, the red mist elongated like a flowing cloud, circled the giant sword once, and began to spiral upwards. When it reached the handguard where the hilt and the body of the sword met, it was suddenly sucked in by the bow-shaped symbol on the handguard. Just as the red mist was sucked in, the bow-shaped symbol suddenly emitted a dazzling golden light and disappeared in a flash. Yu Qianqiu closed his eyes from the piercing pain. When he opened his eyes again, he didn't know if he was imagining things, but he felt that the bow seemed to have become much more lifelike, filled with a tension that was ready to be unleashed. "Yu Qianqiu, what did you do to it just now?" Immortal Crocodile asked in surprise. "Damn it. Old monster, you should ask what it did to me." Yu Qianqiu paused. He suddenly felt as if something on the sword was staring at him. It was as if a pair of deep and frightening eyes were hidden in the sword, silently watching him. He looked carefully, but there was nothing different. He didn't find anything different about the sword, but it made him feel like he was being watched. Yu Qianqiu was holding his breath and observing silently when he suddenly heard a sigh. Sigh. A deep sigh full of ancient charm reverberated in his ears, making him feel as if he had traveled through time and space to the distant past. The sound gradually dissipated after a long time. Who is it? Don't sneak around. Come out if you dare." Yu Qianqiu looked around vigilantly. Below, Immortal Crocodile's big red eyes were also looking around, full of doubt. But Yu Qianqiu didn't seem to be faking it. He couldn't help but ask, "Yu Qianqiu, what's wrong with you? Didn't you hear it just now?" Yu Qianqiu looked around vigilantly and asked, "Someone sighed in my ear just now. Didn't you hear it?" His big red eyes paused, and then he looked around again, but he didn't find anything. Immortal Crocodile said strangely, "I didn't hear anything. I didn't find anyone either. Are you hallucinating because you were injured just now?" Yu Qianqiu looked around and said suspiciously, "Is that so? You really didn't hear anything?" Immortal Crocodile immediately said, "Isn't my cultivation higher than yours? If you can hear it, how can I not hear it? Stop being so suspicious. Hurry up and think of a way to help me pull the sword out." Hearing this, Yu Qianqiu thought about it and felt that it was true, so he withdrew his suspicious and vigilant attitude. He walked up to the giant sword again, tilted his head and looked around. Indeed, he didn't find anything unusual, but the blood-sucking scene just now inevitably made him suspicious. He carefully stretched out a finger and gently poked the sword. Seeing that there was no reaction, he poked it twice. After confirming that there was no problem, he touched his chest, which was still a little stuffy, and suddenly felt that this injury was too undeserved. "I say, Master Yu, what are you waiting for? Hurry up and think of a way to pull it out." Immortal Crocodile couldn't help but urge him again. "Shut up. You've been suppressed for so many years. Don't you care about this little bit of time? Can't you see that I'm thinking of a way? Yu Qianqiu mercilessly said to him, stroking the dark golden blade with his palm, muttering to himself. It's a little too big. It's a little difficult to cut. If only it could be a little smaller. Immortal crocodile, who was below, also exclaimed at the same time. The two of them were stunned at the same time. Yu Qianqiu rubbed his eyes in disbelief, thinking that he was hallucinating. He really seemed to have seen the giant sword shrink a little just now. Yu Qianqiu lifted his foot and stomped on immortal crocodile below, asking, Old monster, did you feel anything unusual just now? Oh, I felt something unusual. I felt the sword in my body move. Really? Why did I feel like it was a little smaller? The two of them stopped talking at the same time. The bottom of the lake was unusually quiet, and they were both a little suspicious. Finally, Immortal Crocodile asked again, What did you do to it just now? I didn't do anything. Yu Qianqiu's head-scratching hand rested on the sword's blade and said, I just wanted to touch it a little. I hope it's a little smaller so that I can. Ugh. His gaze immediately froze. This time, it seemed that the huge sword had shrunk a little. Below, Immortal Crocodile's voice trembled as it said, I also feel that it's a little smaller. You seem to be able to control it. Control it. Try again and see if you can make it smaller. Let me feel it carefully again. Yu Qianqiu looked at his palm in disbelief, and carefully pressed it on the sword. He said weakly, Make it a little smaller. He retracted his hand and asked in a trembling voice, either excited or afraid, Old monster, it seems to have shrunk again. Do you feel it? Yes. Try again. Make it shrink as much as possible. As long as my pin life soul escapes, I can escape on my own. Immortal Crocodile was extremely excited. Yu Qianqiu pressed his palm on the sword again, and calmed his emotions. He looked up at the outline of the giant sword and said, Smaller. Sure enough, he clearly saw the giant sword shrink this time. Smaller. Immortal Crocodile felt the movement of the giant sword in his body, and immediately shouted excitedly with Yu Qianqiu. The more they shouted, the more excited they became. Yu Qianqiu watched as the giant sword shrank rapidly until the hilt reached his shoulder. Suddenly, there was a tremor under his feet, and he stopped shouting. Looking left and right, he saw a huge silvery white body slowly twisting and turning. It looked a little scary. Old monster, you can move now? Yu Qianqiu asked in shock. Immortal Crocodile laughed wildly and said, The giant sword has shrunk and moved away from the life soul that was pinned to my side. I can escape. Yu Qianqiu, thank you. Stand still. With a loud shout, the giant crocodile's huge body, which had been lying there for more than 100,000 years, shook. Its huge tail began to shake, and its huge and ferocious head began to raise. Its huge and strong limbs began to support itself. The surrounding clear lake water quickly became turbid due to the commotion. Chapter 731. Garland and the others, who were waiting by the shore, suddenly saw waves on the calm surface of the lake. The entire moon lake seemed to be in turmoil. The cannibals retreated in horror, their eyes filled with fear of the unknown. The undercurrent under the lake moved. Yu Qianqiu, who was standing behind the giant crocodile, hurriedly squatted down to reduce the huge resistance his body had to withstand. He grabbed the uneven silver-white armor with both hands to prevent himself from being thrown off. As the giant crocodile's strong limbs slowly lifted up, the giant sword, which had shrunk a lot, slowly sank into the body along with the hilt. Crimson blood stained a large area of the lake. Not long after, the giant crocodile stood up completely, its whole body shining with silver light. All of a sudden, the huge body lying at the bottom of the lake disappeared. Yu Qianqiu looked around in shock, only to see the dark golden giant sword, which was more than 10 meters tall, standing at the bottom of the lake, inserted into a huge rock. There was a groove at the bottom of the lake, created by the huge body. Yu Qianqiu, shouldn't you come down? Immortal Lord Crocodile's voice suddenly came from below. Yu Qianqiu looked down and was shocked. He saw himself riding on the shoulder of a person, his hands holding the person's head. How could this be? There was no need to rush him anymore. Yu Qianqiu jumped away, floating in the lake, and looked at the person in front of him suspiciously. This person was tall and well-built. He wore a silver-white robe, and his snow-white hair fluttered in the lake. He was a large man with a pale face and no facial hair. His bright and piercing eyes stared at Yu Qianqiu with a smile. Yu Qianqiu asked carefully, "Old monster, is that you? Do I not look like it?" The other party asked with a smile. Yu Qianqiu floated around him twice, muttering, "Sounds like the voice of an old monster." Waha! Immortal Lord Crocodile shook his silver hair and laughed wildly. "Yu Qianqiu, it is me. This old man is finally free." Yu Qianqiu was taken aback. He took a few more glances at him before he rolled his eyes and said, "What's so funny about being free? Are you afraid that people don't know that you've been suppressed for more than 100,000 years?" After saying that, he turned around and floated towards the giant sword. He placed his hand on it and muttered, "Smaller, smaller, smaller." The dark golden giant sword rapidly shrank. The unbridled smile on Immortal Lord Crocodile's face froze, and his mouth fell open. On second thought, getting out of trouble should be something to be happy about, right? Why did it seem like he was shameless after hearing what this kid said? He opened his mouth and wanted to be happy, but he found that he couldn't smile at all. Immortal Lord Crocodile's facial muscles twitched. He closed his mouth and looked at the huge mark at the bottom of the lake. He sighed. He had been trapped for 100,000 years. Indeed, there was nothing funny about it. She should feel sad instead. Sigh. With a long sigh, Immortal Lord Crocodile turned to look at Yu Qianqiu, only to find that Yu Qianqiu had disappeared. Just as he was feeling strange, he saw Yu Qianqiu jump out of the crack at the bottom of the lake. The crack was the wide hole that the giant sword had pierced into the rock at the bottom of the lake. Yu Qianqiu was holding an ancient dark golden sword in his hand. He was stroking it with a look of curiosity. Immortal Lord Crocodile's pupils shrank as he stared at the sword in Yu Qianqiu's hand. He was all too familiar with this sword. It was the divine sword that the Myriad Swords demon lord used to suppress him. Yu Qianqiu inadvertently caught a glimpse of his eyes. He immediately hugged the sword and said in a low voice, "What are you trying to do? Let me tell you, we have a blood alliance. This sword is mine now. Don't you dare try anything funny." Immortal Lord Crocodile shook his head and said, "Don't misunderstand. I'm just curious how you can pick it up so easily with your cultivation. Can you really control it?" Yu Qianqiu asked suspiciously, "You really won't snatch it?" Immortal Lord Crocodile didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "Why would I snatch it? Although this sword is good, not everyone can control it. If I'm not careful, I might get hurt by it. Even if it falls into my hands, it's no better than an ordinary immortal treasure. Besides, I can't even thank you enough. Why would I snatch something from you? I'm just curious how you can control this divine sword." Yu Qianqiu stroked the sword and said proudly, "Blood test. You've never heard of it, right? This is called fate." "Blood test my ass. It's been stuck in my body for so many years, and I've lost at least a few 100 kilograms of blood. But I've never seen it recognize me." Although Immortal Lord Crocodile said this, with his experience, he had already guessed that what Yu Qianqiu said was true. This divine sword must have recognized him as its master. A branch of the heaven-splitting arrow, a divine sword possessed by the remnant of the great god Yi's soul, had recognized this kid as its master. Immortal Lord Crocodile looked at Yu Qianqiu with a complicated expression. He couldn't tell what he was feeling. There was jealousy, envy, and amazement. In fact, as he said, not everyone could control this divine weapon. It had nothing to do with cultivation. Only those who were recognized by the divine weapon had the right to control it. Immortal Lord Crocodile had a vague guess. This kid might have been recognized by the remnant of the great god Yi's soul, which was why he could control this sword. Otherwise, with his cultivation, it would be difficult for him to pick it up so easily. Although he knew everything, he just didn't want to say it. Yu Qianqiu held the sword and touched it. He couldn't bear to part with it. He laughed and said, "Good stuff. Good stuff. I don't know how powerful it is, but it can't be wrong. If I don't like anyone else, I'll try it on them." In fact, he didn't know what was so good about the divine sword, but he kept praising it. "Yu Qianqiu, I advise you not to take this thing out. I won't snatch it from you, but it doesn't mean that others won't. Immortal Lord Crocodile sighed slightly. If it were 100,000 years ago, I would definitely snatch it. However, I've been silent with it for 100,000 years, and I know a little about it. The power of the great god E is inviolable, and I don't think I can control it. However, others don't think so. The treasure left behind by the great god E had once shown its power in the hands of 10,000 swords. This is something that everyone knows. Once people know that you have a divine sword, I'm afraid that not many people can resist its temptation. You'll be in big trouble then. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He immediately put away the divine sword and looked around, as if he was afraid of being seen. Immortal Lord Crocodile's silver hair fluttered in the wind. He shook his head and said, "You know better." He really couldn't understand why the divine sword would recognize Yu Qianqiu as its master. "Thank you for the reminder." Yu Qianqiu chuckled. He suddenly frowned and asked, "Old monster, I've already helped you get out of trouble. Shouldn't you tell me about the purple flame?" Immortal Lord Crocodile was stunned. He said awkwardly, "Actually, I don't know where the purple flame is." "What?" Yu Qianqiu's face immediately fell. He said in a low voice, "Old monster, you lied to me? Don't be anxious. Let me finish what I'm saying. Although I don't know the exact location of the purple flame, I know its rough location. Do you want to hear it?" A smile immediately appeared on Yu Qianqiu's face. He nodded repeatedly and said, "I want to hear it. I want to hear it. Tell me quickly." Immortal Lord Crocodile said in a low voice, "It's said that the reason why the Myriad Swords Demon Lord was able to set up the heaven and earth formation here was because he relied on the infinite power of the purple flame. The purple flame is also the source of power, supporting the entire heaven and earth formation. This should be true. Otherwise, the heaven and earth formation wouldn't be able to trap so many immortal and netherworld experts. Based on this deduction, the purple flames should be supporting the operation of the entire formation in this sealed continent. That you're tuning in to the Li Mei's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.